Good afternoon, patrons, and welcome to the November 2018 Patroncast. Oh yes, it is that time of the month again, and I'm going to be honest, I'm very tired. I'm very, very tired right now because, well, I'm always tired, like when it gets to end of November, early December. This is the busiest time of the year for me by far. But this year has been particularly bad because since the last Patroncast, if I recall correctly, we've had new Crusader Kings 2 DLC, new Total War Warhammer 2 DLC, new Stellaris DLC, a new Just Cause, a new Hitman, and a new Fallout. So this is probably the busiest single month I've ever had in the history of the channel. There's been a ridiculously large amount to cover, and some of this has just involved basically me throwing all concepts of my normal schedule out of the window. So just last night I went to bed, I think it was about 3 a.m. I was editing Fallout 76, the episode of Cats that was out on last Thursday. I'm actually recording this on last Thursday, by the way, so this is something I was doing on Wednesday evening to go out what is for me today, what is for you a few days ago. So yeah, I was doing that till about, I think, 20 past 2 in the morning, just because if I didn't do it then, it would need to be done in the morning. So I end up going to bed late and I end up getting up late, and I just get stuck in a cycle of my days and nights sort of blurring together. It's a very busy time of the year. I'm kind of hoping I can kind of bring it back to making a bit more sense over the coming days. So yes, obviously the biggest thing is a Fallout game came out, and I probably want to address this first up. I'll skip down to the questions because there's a load of questions about Fallout 76, and mainly I'd probably be talking about Fallout 76 if I was just talking about the month in general. But let's start off with the single question I think that was actually asked 10 times or something, so I may as well address it up front. And that question was, what did I think about the reviews of Fallout 76? And I've got to say, I was surprised. I was genuinely surprised. I wasn't surprised that it didn't get glowing reviews. I was expecting it to be divisive, right from the very first West Virginia event when I was chatting about it with the other YouTubers and journalists who were there. Straight away I said, this is going to be a divisive one. Alright, there's going to be some people that are going to be on board with this if they accept it for what it is. There's going to be some people who are going to go in and they're going to, be wanting it to be a strong single-player RPG story experience, a traditional Fallout experience, which it clearly doesn't want to be, and they're going to be disappointed by that. So it's really going to divide people. But if you'd asked me to predict what I thought the review scores might look like, I might have said, okay, so on the one hand, there's good things, I like the way it looks. I think the actual the core gameplay loop is quite engaging. There's a lot of positive things from Fallout 4 that have actually been improved upon. I think it works well as a multiplayer experience. There's good stuff there, but there's bad stuff too. It's probably a bit on the shallow side for some people. There's clearly technical problems. It could do with more content. Some of the new system for there being no NPCs, and that's everything being about robots, doesn't work so well, even if I quite like the way it handles environmental storytelling. If you'd asked me to predict, I'd probably say maybe it's going to get on average something about a 7.5 out of 10. Oh no. No. It has done much worse than that, and I'm genuinely surprised because some of these people who wrote those reviews, I was sitting down with them in the West Virginia event, they didn't seem that negative at the time. Maybe these people have just really damn good poker faces, and when they're actually at these events, they're very good at keeping their opinions to themselves for the time being. Maybe they changed their opinion having played the final version because, they didn't want to judge it till they played the final version, because Bethesda did say, we know there's X, Y, and Z technical issues, those are going to be improved. Maybe they were expecting, a better performance on PC than what they ultimately got. I don't know. I don't know what it was that kind of caused reviews to be as they are. But yeah, they were lower than I was expecting. And I can understand why. But I think there is an element to which the game is being judged against slightly unfair characteristics. For example, I love toast. I absolutely love toast. Toast is wonderful and delicious, and I love toast. And toasters make toast, so therefore, I like toasters. However, I don't hate microwaves because they're very bad if you put a bit of bread in them, of turning them into... Wait, do microwaves actually what happens if you actually do put a piece of bread into a microwave? Would it be toasted? I'm guessing not. Like, not in the same way, because, like, the heat's not coming, like, from both sides to... I'm going to work into the assumption you just end up with hot bread. But, like, I've never actually tried that. Don't put bread in the microwave without looking it up, because I don't know if it, like, explodes or something. Anyway, the point I was trying to very clumsily get to there is you don't judge a microwave negatively because it's not a toaster, because they're two separate things. And Fallout 76 is a spin-off game. It was never supposed to be that single-player RPG experience. I can understand, therefore, why many people would choose not to partake in it if the single-player RPG action experience is what they want out of a Fallout game. But I think it's a bit harsh when you're trying to, like, objectively sum it up and put a number on it to seemingly hold that against it. So I feel like maybe there was a little bit of harshness going on there. I mean, I think, like, the real problems are showing up in some of the online coverage. Because, you know, obviously I'm putting together some of my own kind of very long thoughts on Fallout 76. In order to do that, I wanted to expose myself to as many varied opinions as I could. So part of what I did was I've basically been watching pretty much every video essay I can find on Fallout 76, the vast majority of which at the minute are kind of in the form of rant videos. And what you can most certainly see is there's a lot of bandwagon jumping going on there, where clearly the Fallout 76 rant video is just a very easy way of getting lots of views right now. So some people have kind of jumped on it, and they don't seem to have actually played much Fallout 76. They don't really know what they're talking about. You can see some clear signs in the way they describe certain mechanics. They're just factually wrong, or like the footage they're actually putting of themselves playing in the background, where they're clearly low level and don't seem to know what they're doing. There's a lot of people who've clearly just jumped onto that bandwagon. There's a couple of, like, talking points that get repeated that strike me as very, very odd indeed. I think just one person must have said it in a review, and everyone else has just kind of copied it since. I'll go into detail in this in, like, the proper video. Like, I could talk about that for, like, several hours, which is probably what I'm going to do in a big video essay at some point, so I won't kind of try and get every single point across now. But, yeah, there's just some really odd stuff that gets said in those videos. What was the one that really... Oh yeah, I remember one person said it looks like a PS2 game. So, okay, one of two things, or possibly both. Either you are lying because rant videos are in right now and you just basically fancy yourself as the new Zero Punctuation, or two, you have the biggest set of rose-tinted spectacles on imaginable. Because, okay, some of the textures in 76 are a bit scruffy, but it looks nothing like a PS2 game. Alright, that is just factually untrue. But, like, some of those, like, ridiculous exaggerations because they wanted to make a rant video, you see that a lot. So there's certainly an alternative case to be made, but I'm not actually planning to start with a defense of Fallout 76. As I've already said on Twitter, the first thing I'm going to make on 76 in, like, a video essay form is going to be a much more calm, measured, deep dive focus on what's gone wrong with 76, how different systems aren't interacting with each other properly, like how several mechanical systems that independently seem like they should work on paper are actually in conflict with each other. So if we do a real proper deep dive into how 76 works, what's wrong with it, and how it might be fixed, which are the easy bits to fix, which are the harder bits to fix, which I think will be very, very interesting indeed. I can't really, like, do any form of, like, proper defense of 76 yet, because there's still a lot of content being rolled out for it. I want to see, like, the style of updates they're planning for 76. They've said in early 2019 there's going to be a couple of, like, special, unique events they're doing. I'd like to see those before I make a judgment. Plus, I haven't actually, like, finished the game yet. Like, before any of these video essays come out, I'd like to actually finish the game, by which I mean the main plot up to wherever that ends precisely, and if not maybe the entire map, then at least the vast majority of the map. I might, like, you know, miss one dungeon somewhere by mistake or something, if there's, like, something hidden away in a forest or at the top of a mountain, and I just happen to forget that I didn't check it out earlier. But I would like to have visited, like, you know, basically every single little map marker on the entire map, and done all of the actual main quests. I don't necessarily think I need to do, like, all of the daily quests. Some of them are just kind of very simple, and they don't really have anything in the way of context or story. They're just basically, okay, here's a thing, go and get it, bring it back. So, like, you know, the criticism, there are fetch quests. That's certainly true for the actual daily quest. That's a completely fair criticism for that. Honestly, the too many quests are just go here and kill something or simple fetch quests. honestly, I feel like that's a more valid criticism directed at Fallout 4. I think 76 actually has a lot of interesting quests if you actually dig into its proper quests, not just its daily quests or its events. Yeah, there's actually quests that are a bit more interesting. But again, sorry, I'm not going to go into all this now. That's just kind of, a couple of high-level thoughts. Like, in summary, I'm surprised the scores are as low as they are. I can understand why it's not getting glowing reviews. I don't think it quite deserves the actual, the negative coverage it's had so far. But Bethesda could be doing a lot more to help themselves, alright? Bethesda just seem to be constantly making unforced errors right now. And the real problem here is long-term reputational damage that Bethesda really need to fix. Because up to now, I agree with a view I've seen kind of floating around online a few times, which is Bethesda previously, I wouldn't say they've had a free pass, but Bethesda have been treated fairly kindly. I think there's something really interesting that I saw inside the initial presentation for 76 at E3, which was Todd Howard was on stage and he made that joke, I've heard some of our games are buggy, I heard it on the internet, it must be true. And people laughed. That was fine. It was okay for Bethesda to come out on stage and make jokes about the bugginess of their own games. It was seen as for most people, it was just seen as an endearing thing. Oh, Bethesda being Bethesda games are buggy. People didn't really hold that against Bethesda. They were given a bit of a free pass on that one. I feel like they've burnt some of that goodwill. I feel like now when they're making mistakes, people are holding those mistakes against them a bit more nastily than they would have done previously, which I think is very, very interesting indeed. And between things like, the canvas bag business and the technical problems and the ridiculous update sizes and the fairly poor way the beta period was communicated, and what was the new one today? Oh yeah, some form of security breach pertaining to support tickets or something. They just keep making mistakes. And I think Bethesda desperately need to just have a period where they don't make big mistakes right now, because they've got some reputational damage to undo. Because I think now when they do inevitably announce Fallout 5 and when they show more details of the next Elder Scrolls game, there's going to be a lot more skepticism than there has been for previous Bethesda announcements, I think. And that's going to be something very interesting to watch. So yeah, those are just some thoughts answering the most common questions that came up below. So that should be about a third of the questions cleared out in one go. Speaking of which, let's nip down there now and see what else we've got this month. Based on the announcement so far, what do you think of the new Civ 6 Gathering Storm expansion? It looks fun. Mainly what I've seen so far has been about the climate stuff and the weather stuff, and that looks fun and interesting. Honestly, I'm most excited by the return of the World Congress, which as far as I'm aware, we haven't seen much in the way of details about yet. I know it's going to be a thing that's been mentioned, but yeah, they don't seem to have really shown it off yet. So I'm reserving my excitement till I see that. Because yeah, having a great big political end game to actually work towards, that strikes me as very, very fun indeed. So yeah, I will definitely be up for giving Civ 6 another look if that turns out to be something cool. If you were to invent your own perk card, what would it be? Ooh, I had to think about this and I came up with an idea. So remember how back in New Vegas there was the Mad Bomber perk, where if you took it, it unlocked a whole bunch of new crafting things. And there's also, what's the other one? There's a Nuka Chemist. Is that in... That's not in Fallout 4. What is Nuka Chemist in? Is that in... I can't remember what game Nuka Chemist is in now, but that unlocks a bunch of stuff too. Basically, I would like one of those, but for tea, and it would fit into Fallout 76 really nicely, because there's already tea in Fallout 76. There's that tea at the giant teapot, which if you actually do the honey quest for that guy, he actually gives you a bunch of, what's it called? Sweetwater's Brew, if I recall correctly. I think it gives you Perception +2, it's actually pretty good, and if you do that quest, he also gives you the recipe, so you can make your own. I think it's it's Irish tea, or... Is that the correct term for tea with alcohol in it? It's got alcohol in it anyway. So, yeah, I suppose Irish coffee, that's Irish tea. So you can make your own. It's actually pretty good. So, yeah, basically, my perk would unlock a whole bunch of crafting recipes for, tea-based drinks that you could make at campfires and double the effect of all caffeinated beverages. That would be me right there. How do you manage the work aspect of your job? Do you have a different computer for accounting or have a defined time or something? I've just started working from home on a computer and you seem to have a handle on this stuff. So it kind of depends, because obviously me and Claire both work for Many a True Nerd, but in very different ways. Claire is on a contract and she has defined hours, so she'll work a certain number of hours per week. That'll be her working hours, and that'll be a lot. And like, we agree ahead of time what days are going to work as her weekend days, because typically it's better if she's working one of the days of the normal Saturday, Sunday weekend, because then of course she's around for the live streams. I'm a bit more kind of working all the time, so I'm kind of bad, actually. Yeah, in fact, I was just mentioning this earlier. Yeah, November's been particularly bad for that sort of thing. Like, for the most part, I do pretty much all my recording and editing in one room. And then when I'm not doing that, I'll be kind of close by to a laptop in our living room. And yeah, very often I'll just be keeping half an eye on Twitter and the live analytics data in YouTube and putting videos live and all that business over there. So honestly, like, I wouldn't ask me for advice on that, because I'm kind of bad at it. Like, I get up, and, like, the moment I wake up, I'll check my phone. I'll just very quickly, like, check my inbox, just check if anything urgent's come in there, check Twitter to make sure if, like, anything urgent's come in there. I'll get up and I'll just kind of, I'll skim through the Many a True Nerd accounts while I'm having breakfast. I'll get straight into recording, and then I'll kind of edit what I've recorded after that point. And then in the evening, I'll be putting out videos and keeping an eye on social stuff. And then I'll go to bed, and then that will just repeat every day forever. Welcome to the sexy life of being a YouTuber. So I'm very bad at that. I'm very bad at taking time off. I took some time off recently because I got ill. Yeah, that was the other fun thing about November. In the middle of all of those games, me and Claire both came down with a cold, which I know doesn't sound very much, but the problem is, if I lose my voice, basically all work stops. So even though, like, it was not that bad at all, it was just I had a really, really bad throat, I was just kind of a bit screwed, because I just couldn't work for multiple days straight. Like, I tried to do something, which is I kind of had no choice but to record the final 2 parts of Crusader Kings 2. So if you listen to the very final part of Crusader Kings 2, the grand finale, you can probably hear my voice starting to strain a little bit and being, like, a bit croaky. Like, that recording is full of me trying to say things 3 times in a row, so it actually sounds right. So I'm sure that was fun for Claire to edit, with me constantly, like, clearing my throat and making all sorts of exciting, sexy throat-clearing noises and whatnot. I'm sure that was absolutely lovely from Claire's point of view, because she had to actually edit that. Felt quite bad about that. But yeah, I actually took a rare bit of time off because I was sick, and then another day we had a bunch of friends come and visit us, and we just, like, went out, we had some lunch together, and came back, and I kind of set up the actual Vive in our front room. We just kind of played some VR stuff together, and I kind of mirrored it onto our TV and set up some speakers so people could see what people were saying, which was really fun. That was really, really fun indeed. So I actually had a day off recently. Hooray for me. But yeah, in general, I wouldn't actually ask my advice on that. I'm super bad at that, because I just never take time to just chill out. Have you had any contact with Bethesda post-launch to give feedback on Fallout 76? Not formally, but I know for a fact that various Bethesda employees and whatnot do just follow the channel anyway. So people at Bethesda have seen what I have put out, which is why I want to make this big, long video essay, which is very much focused on constructive criticism, talking about what's wrong with 76 and how to fix it. Because, I suppose if anyone's got a reasonable chance of actually putting suggestions to Bethesda in a practical way for things that could be done to improve the game, then I suppose I've got a pretty good shot of Bethesda actually taking notice of them. So who knows, maybe it can even have a positive impact on Fallout 76. John, any chance of a Hitman 2 Master Difficulty Silent Assassin You Only Live Once run? There'll be something more on Hitman 2. I don't know what exactly. The thing is, I need to actually play the game a bit more myself first. Like, I've played through the first... Yeah, I've played through Miami a bit. I've played through that mission, just kind of going through the various story missions, just so I get a bit used to what's where, because you can't really do the most difficult stuff, like, suit-only Silent Assassin on Master Difficulty, until you know how all of the opportunities work, because then you know how to move people around the levels most effectively. So, yeah, I might be able to do that, but I need to do that for, like, all the levels before I can do that, so that's going to be a little way off. Can we get a supercut of all the Crusader King 2 ruler obituaries where you eulogise them? Not that precisely, but there is going to be a bonus episode of Crusader Kings 2 that's like an epilogue, which is like a where are they now thing, where I'm going to kind of go through the dynasty tree, talking about like who ended up where, because yeah, actually members of the Kurnow dynasty have actually gone all over the shop. Like, you know, briefly they were floating around as the rulers of Denmark, loads of them fled up to Scotland and did very well there. So I'm just going to try and like follow those family trees downwards and actually see what happened to the descendants of the Kurnow dynasty and how far and wide they managed to spread around the world, because that seems cool. And yeah, and things like what happened to John the Fat's line, because John the Fat's line as a Kurnow died out, but his children and grandchildren did go on to do other things. So I kind of want to see where that line went, for example. So I think that might be fun, together with looking at, like, you know, the culture map for the world and the religion map for the world as it was at the end. Yeah, just basically a bit of fun wrapping up, a bit of closure on a few bits and pieces. As someone who enjoys the study of history, I recently read a bunch of Plutarch's Lives. It was one of those books I had left over from my college days that I never got around to. They were quite interesting both for what they said and what they totally ignored. I presume you've read his works and more. What do you think of them? I have read some of Plutarch's Lives. I have not read all of them because there's quite a few. There's like a little bit over 20 or something. I can't remember now. There's quite a few. Anyway, and they are interesting, but not as history. They're basically gossip mags, as far as I'm concerned. I guess you're unfamiliar with this, by the way. Plutarch's kind of gimmick was he kind of took two historical figures and wrote their biographies as like a matching pair, which naturally leads to problems because human lives are hugely complex and you can't just like pair up two people or pair up two empires and say, oh yes, they were mirror images of each other, very similar, but they ended up differently, or da da da. No, that's, you know, it's a work of morality and a work of philosophy, but, you know, he very openly says himself it's not really a work of what we would call history. So it's very interesting, and on occasion it's very important because some of the lives that Plutarch wrote we don't really have many sources about. So even just like the vague outline of their lives that we can assume is broadly the case is very useful to us. But honestly, if you kind of ask me to choose between Plutarch and someone who tells an alternative story about a historical figure, I'd pretty much go with the other person 100% of the time, unless they were Herodotus, in which case just throw everything in a bin and set it on fire, because who bloody knows what's true at that point. John, why have you forsaken Red Dead Redemption 2? Please bring it back. I will probably bring it back at some point. You've probably noticed it's been quite busy. It would have been a horrendously busy November even if I hadn't got ill halfway through it. But yeah, especially with a new Fallout game, and, you know, I've fallen so in love with Crusader Kings 2, and then Holy Fury happened, and we had to wrap up the series there, and then Stellaris, and diddly-diddly-dee. It would have been an insanely busy November, busier than last November, even without me getting sick, and even without bloody Hitman on top of that. That's just why, yeah, games that I would have liked to have continued have just kind of fallen by the wayside a little bit for the time being. I'm thinking it probably should come back as like a Friday series at some point, but I just need to break the back of where me and Claire are right now. Because the thing is, right now we're way too close to the wire. Because, you know, it's very stressful. It's also very inefficient if, like, one day I'm making a video that needs to launch the next day. Because then if I don't have time to actually, like, you know, record it and then edit it and then render it and then upload it overnight, then it needs to be uploaded during the day. And if it's uploading during the day, that kind of ties up my internet. And then, okay, fine. Now all of a sudden, I probably can't record Fallout 76 because that will slow down the upload, or potentially I'll have problems with latency in Fallout 76. So, yeah. It's just a problem. Basically, I need to be at bare minimum a few days ahead of where I need to be, and right now we're not. So Claire and I are working very, very hard right now to try and get caught up to where we should be, especially as Claire's going to have some time off over Christmas where she's not going to be on the clock at all. She'll go and kind of see friends and family and whatnot. So, yeah, we need to get caught up and get ahead of the game ahead of that. Once we are actually caught up, at that point, we can look at what ought to come back and in what form it ought to come back. So I imagine you will see it again. I just don't know exactly when and in what form. John, are you excited for the upcoming Resident Evil 2 remake? It does look very good. It does look very, very good indeed. I'm going to be honest, Resident Evil 2 was never my favourite. I was a fan of the original Resident Evil. Then I kind of didn't really ever pay too much attention to 2 and Nemesis. I really like Code Veronica. I think Code Veronica is great. I originally played Was it called Code Veronica X? That was the GameCube version, right? Because that was the version I played originally. And then, of course, Resident Evil 4 I fell in love with, and Resident Evil 5 and 6 were total garbage fires. But, like, I'm most fond of the original Resident Evil remake that was originally on the GameCube, and the Resident Evil 4 on the GameCube. And, okay, basically, I just discovered Resident Evil on the GameCube, okay? That's what I've just discovered about myself right there. So, I'm more into, yeah, the original remake, Code Veronica X, and Resident Evil 4. But I may well give it a look. Absolutely. The problem is Capcom they're not 100% keen on YouTubers. To be honest, Capcom are a little bit hard to communicate with. They never really provide me with review code. They don't seem desperately keen on YouTubers. Like the Resident Evil 6 miniseries I did back in the day, that got Content ID matched repeatedly because Capcom were Content ID matching all of the cutscenes. So if they're still doing that, yeah, Capcom are probably these days the least YouTube-friendly company left in the world. Because, yeah, Nintendo have actually come around. I'm going to answer the second question that came up like 5 or 6 times now, actually. So Nintendo, in case you kind of missed this, they used to have what they called the Nintendo Creator Program, which basically said if you wanted to actually have Nintendo content on a YouTube channel, you needed to sign up to this program. That meant Nintendo took like 30 to 40% of all ad revenue that video made, and also you needed to submit it to Nintendo like ahead of time or whatever, so they could check they were happy with it. And basically, it was just very YouTuber unfriendly and very consumer unfriendly as well, because it basically meant Nintendo said we have the right to check that your footage is what we want it to be, and that's not very open. That's not very open at all, because what would stop them just looking at something that said, oh yeah, the new Nintendo whatever, like, you know, if someone didn't like the new Mario Party, I think the new Mario Party is garbage, and Nintendo could just say, actually no, we've decided not to approve that, you can't put that out. So yeah, it was never a good thing for anybody. So basically, I and a lot of other people have just been quietly taking part of a Nintendo embargo for years, where we never look at Nintendo games at all. But Nintendo basically finally gave up recently, probably because they realised that next to every other publisher in the world, they get very little coverage on YouTube when a new Nintendo game comes out, because vast numbers of the biggest YouTubers basically say, it's not worth the fuss, it's not worth the hassle, I don't like having to work with the Nintendo Creator Program, I'd rather do literally anything else, because everyone else is easier to work with, and you actually get to, like, you know, keep your own ad revenue and whatever. Because bear in mind, YouTube already takes, like, you know, a big chunk out of ad revenue. If Nintendo take another big chunk, there's not actually much left for the person who made the video, which arguably isn't that important, because ad revenue is not as important as it used to be. These days, things like, you know, live stream donations and Patreon and the YouTube Red revenue, or whatever they're calling it today, because that thing seems to constantly keep changing its name, that altogether is worth a lot more than ad revenue is. Ad revenue is a fairly small part of the pie these days, but it's still annoying. It just didn't sit right with me. The Nintendo just sat there saying, we shall be the arbiters of what it is and isn't okay to say, and we shall rule from on high. In 2 to 4 weeks after you let us see the video, we might let you know what's going on. Even if we do like it and say it's okay, we'll still be taking, you know, even more of your ad revenue beyond what YouTube itself takes. Never sat right with me. So they've basically backed down and said, okay, that was stupid. Now pretty much their advice is the same as every other publisher's, which is, do what you want on YouTube. If you're a partner on YouTube, monetize the videos. We don't care. I think, like, the one criteria that's a little bit odd is they say it's got to be, like, transformative, in the sense of you can't just basically take a game and just upload it as is. You've got to be actually, you know, providing your own commentary or editing it down or something, which I always do. So that's all absolutely 100% fine. So yeah, this opens the door to potential Nintendo content on the channel, which is cool. And I have ideas. I have some ideas. Nothing solid yet, but watch this space. We'll be kind of, you know, opening up some Nintendo coverage with something a bit special. I've got like a little mini-series in mind to kind of officially break the embargo with. So watch this space. I'm not ready to confirm what it is yet, but there's something in the works. As a content creator, how terrified of Article 13 are you? This is a bit of EU legislation that potentially is going to cause trouble for YouTubers. If it proceeds in its current form, it could certainly be disruptive and problematic. The thing is, the EU tends to be pretty good at just kind of fudging things at the last minute, so yeah, I mean, I don't want to comment on this hugely because it's a very complex topic and I am not a lawyer. I'm not qualified to talk about this. The thing is, anything like this, anything this kind of big and wide and all-encompassing, there will be loopholes, there'll be ways around it, ways will be found. So we watch this with interest and caution, but I'm not terrified yet. I'd rather it all got shut down and, I've done what I can writing to MEPs and what have you, but yeah, I'm not really qualified to talk about it in detail, to be honest, so I'll leave things there. John, have you ever played Star Wars Empire at War? Briefly, a long time ago. And I agree with your follow-up point that it had very, very impressive space battles. I was never so keen on the ground bits. That was the problem I had with it. I just didn't really enjoy the actual ground combat. It felt very slow and sluggish and counterintuitive to me. But I will agree, the space battles are very, very spectacular indeed. And I would not be surprised to see a miniseries of that at some point, but it is not planned for any time soon. John, can you recommend a series from yourself? I was only following the Crusader Kings 2 series, which sadly has come to an end, and the occasional one-off. I have seen the ones for Skyrim and Total War as well, not the live streams. The catch is, I have absolutely no interest in the Fallout series. Okay, I'm going to suggest, two of my favourite series that we've put together is, XCOM Enemy Unknown. I think the XCOM series was very, very fun indeed. And, though it's kind of getting on a bit these days, I think Deadly Premonition is a really fun series. It's just such a weird, delightful game. So, yeah, I'd suggest those two to you. John, will we be getting a video of you playing any Christmas-themed games? Yes, in fact, there will be a Christmas Day special. I haven't said exactly what it's going to be yet because there's 2 candidates. So, watch this space. I don't know which one it's going to be as yet. John, how many 10-year-old children do you think you could take in a no-holds-barred fight? Well, that really depends, doesn't it? Are they coming at me one at a time, or are they basically going to swarm me in a crowd? Because if they're just allowed to swarm me, then it's possible they might just be able to get me down on the ground and start kicking me before I can really do anything to any of them. If they're coming one at a time, then, the thing is, I'd be worried that I might hesitate. Okay, are we assuming these are psychopath 10-year-old children, where they've got no chance whatsoever of hesitating themselves? Because if they're coming at me and they're actually looking to try and kill me somehow, I'm worried that I would hesitate when asked to actually, try and murder a 10-year-old child. So, if they're coming one at a time, I'd probably only get through a few of them before I just was hesitating so much that one of them got an opening and got me on the ground. If they came all at once, they might be able to swarm me before I even got one of them. So, kind of depends on the circumstances of how many 10-year-old children are coming at once and what they're like. Hi there, are you planning on doing a Tyranny Let's Play? I have once upon a time done 2 parts, I believe, on Tyranny already, back when it originally came out. There are no plans to revisit it. I believe it's got some DLC at various points. I mean, it clearly is a very well put together game, but that sort of thing, the very, very, very deep real-time combat, isometric, but with pausing, it's not really my bread and butter, to be honest. A game of that description that I played not so long ago that I did actually like was, the Pillars of Eternity games. I quite liked Pillars of Eternity 2. That was quite good, which feels like it's very, very similar to Tyranny. But yeah, for some reason that one just clicked with me a little bit more. So if I were to revisit a game like that, it would probably be Pillars of Eternity, not Tyranny. Interesting editing style on the Just Cause 4 video. Was that intended as a bit of an experiment, or did it just make sense for such a crazy game? Fun fact, that's actually 3.5 hours of raw footage there. It's just, I decided I wanted to cut it down to the absolute craziest stuff, and it just turned out to be 17 minutes. So there was loads that just basically got cut out there, loads of stuff I did that was okay, here's how this works and here's how you do this, but I just figured it wasn't so interesting. I felt like the focus of the game is so much on ridiculous chaos. It almost felt weird for there to be anything in the video that wasn't ridiculous chaos. So I decided to just cut it, so that was what it was like. It wasn't really an experiment I'd replicate. It just felt like the right way to do that particular game with its very specific ethos. A question for Editing Claire. Her take on the very recent protests that have been occurring in France and Paris. Go ahead, Claire.
Well, it is quite interesting. I haven't had as much time as I would have liked recently to kind of do a bit more of a deep dive and read a lot of articles about the protests. from French media as well as British media because we've been so busy. But I don't think it's entirely surprising to see protests against Macron because he was elected kind of as a protest vote. He's not from either of the traditional left or right parties in France, and of course he was up against the far right in the second turn of our election, so that kind of meant that a lot of people who weren't necessarily wild about him voted for him to counter the National Front, but then, they are not wild about his policies, and economically it's difficult for a lot of people. So I don't know, I think one of the most interesting aspects of these recent protests is that they seem to have started happening because people were calling for them online, and that's something that's quite new in the protest movements in France. But I find it also very worrying that we're seeing reports of the fact that these protests are very much like the far left and the far right marching together, which is not cool. It would be great if we could not do that. Anyway, I will be interested in reading more about it in coming weeks, and also talking to my parents when I go to France and kind of see how they've experienced it from France itself, although they are in a small town and it probably doesn't have massive protests in it.
Do you have any thoughts on the various competing platforms to Steam, like Humble Store, itch.io, all of that business? It really depends, really depends, because I kind of divide them into two groups, which is there are some platforms that seem to exclusively exist because major publishers want to basically gatekeep all their games within their own platform, presumably so they don't actually have to pay any fees to Steam or what have you, or so they can have their own refund policy or whatever. And generally that's probably a bad thing for the consumer. If, however, it's a genuine competitor to Steam, where everyone's allowed on it, that's probably healthy for the industry as a whole, for devs and for consumers. Because Steam having a monopoly is not a good thing. So Epic's new launcher that they're looking at, where they're going to be charging devs a smaller cut to be on it, that's good, because that's going to force Steam to be more dev-friendly as well. And if there's a bit of friendly competition between two similar platforms, that's probably, well, I know it sounds odd to say, but I suspect in that case that will be consumer friendly. I know it doesn't sound consumer friendly to potentially have your games divided between multiple platforms rather than all in one place. And certainly the reason I basically have everything on Steam is it's very convenient to have it all in one place. But if it does get divided out, and devs are basically having to be fought over by the different platforms, it's probably going to be a good deal for devs, and that's probably going to filter down to a better deal for consumers in the long run. Are you going to look at Mutant Year Zero? Oh yes, I've been keeping an eye on that one for quite some time. Current plan is that should be coming this next Tuesday. Hopefully anyway. Obviously I'm recording this a few days before you hear it, so plans might have changed in the meantime, but this coming Tuesday is the current plan. John, I'm a bit confused about the Skyrim playthrough. I've seen the episode where you just brought Benor back after you sadistically threw him off a cliff, but I remember you saying that you went down the cliff looking for the body and hadn't found him, that he was completely dead and had disappeared, but in that episode you brought him back, he was back there. So what was the real deal? Because it's confusing me more than it should. Okay, so the suffering of Benor went far beyond what you knew about. Alright, the suffering of Benor was, huge in order to make that actual bit of plot work. So, here's what actually took place, which is after we murdered Benor, the first, second? Yeah, okay, so we killed Benor by shouting him off the bridge. But that didn't actually kill him. That episode faded to black, but he was not actually dead if I recall correctly. So what we needed to do was keep him off on one side, because he needed to be killed again in order to be brought back. So I simply basically hid him away somewhere in the world. In fact, weirdly, he ended up in the house in Windhelm, and then he accidentally showed up in one of the shots. Once when I was actually in Windhelm doing some of the Windhelm quests, I went to the property in Windhelm, to just record another bit, and he was just there. He just walked into shots. So I had to actually undo that. So one of the shots that's actually in my house in Windhelm, I kind of put Benner in the corner, but he was actually there, out of shot. He was actually alive in that house at the time. Then, when we brought Benor back from the dead, I had to go and pick him up from the house in Windhelm, take him to the canyon, murder him properly this time, and then put his body somewhere on the rocks in order that I could officially find him on camera to bring him back as a thrall. That was how that actually went, but now I'm trying to remember whether the original shout actually killed him or not. I think actually, now I'm thinking about it, I think when I shouted him off the bridge, because he was a companion at the time, because I dismissed him, I think he did actually die, but I needed to use console commands to resurrect him in order to stash him in the house in Windhelm so I could kill him again in order to bring him back as a thrall. So I could then kill him a third time, but then I needed to bring him back from the dead that time as well with console commands so he could be waiting in the Hall of Heroes. Basically, the suffering of Benor was even worse than what you thought it was. Hello John, Claire and Tabby. Dan of Nerdcube mentioned in one of his recent Patroncasts that his YouTube views had pretty much halved in recent months. Have you had any similar issues yourself? No, that's because I think our channel's much more regular. So our views tend to be fairly regular and affected by seasonality and game releases more than anything else. So the past 2 months for us have been pretty good. The views in October and November have been up on what we were seeing in September and August. And that's mainly because a bunch of new games have come out. In particular, Fallout 76 games that are very relevant to the people who are subscribed to the channel. So it's been a decent couple of months for us. December's going to be a bit quieter, and then things will definitely quieten down a lot in January. So I'm anticipating a big drop in January. That's normal. That's completely to be expected for a YouTuber. That's why, Patreon and live streams are so important, because that means we've got a nice little kind of safe, stable foundation. So even if ad revenue and views completely fall off a cliff, we're still safe. So yeah, we're entering the part of the year where Patreon is particularly of importance. Yes. Also, I've just picked up a cheap DS license. I've been playing Pokemon Leaf Green. Not played any of them since Silver or Gold. What's your favourite gen of Pokemon that I should continue picking up in the future? Ooh, interesting. For me, it's a toss-up between 2 and 4. I think 2 is perhaps the greatest technical achievement in Pokemon history. If you consider just how complex and interesting and big Gold, Silver and Crystal were compared to the technology they were running on, because this ran on an original Game Boy and a Game Boy Color, the size and the depth and the complexity of that world, and then, the 8 badges, then the Elite Four, and then just, oh yeah, by the way, there's an entirely unrelated brand new world. Here's another 8 badges for you to go and take care of as well. That was ridiculous. And then in Crystal, there was the beginning of, the battle factories and all of that business. That all existed in Crystal, too. And if you had the Japanese version, there was bloody online play. We never got that in Europe, but yeah, that was the first ever online play in Pokemon. The Japanese version of Crystal had the Game Boy Mobile adapter. So yeah, I'd say, Gold, Silver, and Crystal are the most ridiculous technical achievements and are marvellous games to this day. But I'd say probably my favourite generation is 4. I think Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum are just great games. I think they're just really great, big, interesting games. Lots of fun Pokemon, a blend of the new and the old stuff, a fun story, lots of variety, huge numbers of Pokemon to capture, interesting world, and yeah, the physical special split was a huge important innovation that made the game a lot more enjoyable to me, because a whole bunch of Pokemon that just previously just didn't have the right stats to actually be that good all of a sudden became a lot more usable. Yeah, probably for me Gen 4 is the most interesting, especially as Platinum was weirdly hard. I've never really noticed in any of the other generations that I played that the special 3rd edition that came out after the initial matching pair was a lot harder, but for me it felt like Platinum was quite tricky. Some of the big boss fights, the gym leaders, they actually kind of really bulked those guys up a little bit. So that was welcome as well. Thank you for your videos on Hitman. They helped get me into the franchise. If you had to rank the levels from Hitman 2016 from favourite to least favourite, ooh, interesting. So Sapienza is at the top, yeah. Then probably Hokkaido in second. Then probably Bangkok. Then Paris. Then Marrakesh, and then at the bottom, it's just got to be Colorado, which just is not a particularly interesting level at all. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that, actually. That's not that much of a difficult decision for me. But I guess you could argue Hokkaido ought to be above Sapienza, but I think I prefer Sapienza just because it's prettier and there's more public areas. There's a bit more interesting sneaking around to be done. Yeah, I think there's a bit more diversity in Sapienza as well, where you've got the beach, and the church and the morgue and the actual streets and all the apartments off the streets and the back streets and then the villa itself and like the cliffs around the back that let you access the castle. Yeah, it's the variety of Sapienza, I think, that carries it over Hokkaido. John, what's your opinion on Metroidvania games? You know, weirdly, I've never been super into them, as in, well, when people talk about Metroidvania, they're often talking about the old 2D style Metroidvanias. It's quite possible I like some modern, like, 3D Metroidvanias without ever really thinking about them as being Metroidvanias. Like, was Metroid Prime a Metroidvania? If it was, I really like Metroid Prime. Metroid Prime and Metroid Prime 2 were both really good games. So if those still were Metroidvanias, then yes, I like the Metroid bit of Metroidvania. I've barely played any Castlevania though. It's just never a franchise I've never really paid much attention to for whatever reason. No particular reason at all, I just happen to have never really played any of them. So, yes, Metroid is my answer to I like Metroidvania, but as a general rule, I'd struggle to actually like name much in the way of games as part of that particular genre, so I'm not sure. You mentioned Hollow Knight in particular. I don't think I've ever played Hollow Knight if I recall correctly. There's definitely not been a video about it, so yeah, it might just be a genre I've got a bit of a blind spot for. Do the ancient languages that you know follow conventional rhyme structure in their poetry? For the most part, no. Instead, yeah, ancient poetry works by a system of meter, where basically we look at syllables as being long or short, where basically there's a series of rules that determine it. Like, certain letters are always going to be long, like the Greek letter omega is just an or sound, which has always got to be long, and certain other letters under certain circumstances are short and under some circumstances are long, and the meter basically says there needs to be a certain flow of long and short in order for the poem to be part of that meter. So it's much more about rhythm than it is about rhyme, to be honest. Sorry, that's probably not a very good explanation. It's kind of difficult to explain if you don't have a grounding in the languages, but hopefully you get what I'm trying to say there. What's your non-video game related highlight of the month? I was about to say the day our friends came over and we just had a nice day together, then I realised we all just played virtual reality games, so that was actually video game related. Can I have it anyway? Because at least part of that day we were not playing video games. Yes, screw it, it's my Patroncast, I'm saying that's what counts. I've always wondered how you and Claire met. I have said this before. It was about a decade ago, shortly after Claire actually came to the UK. Back in those days, I didn't do YouTube and Claire didn't do YouTube. Instead, we both did different things, but we both actually did like little bits of writing just for, you know, a bit of a creative outlet. So we were both doing a NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, where you try and write a 50,000 word novella in the month of November, and we met there and I haven't been able to get rid of her since. Hi John, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to all at MATN Towers. I wanted to ask if Fallout New California is something we can look forward to in the new year. Yes. In fact, you don't even need to wait to the new year. It should be coming next week. Unless, of course, something goes horribly wrong and I just physically cannot make it work. But it should be coming next week as a replacement for Dust, which is coming to its end. In fact, will it have already come to its end by now? Yes, by the time you see this, it should have been announced it's the grand finale of Dust. So its replacement is indeed New California next week, or at least it should be if I don't run into tech problems. Who would win in battle between Connor from Crusader Kings 2 or Julianus Vatinius? Well, obviously Julianus Vatinius. I mean, Connor is a bastard and a dick, but he was never really a spectacular military leader. In fact, what probably happened there is he set the battle up and challenged Julianus Vatinius to that battle. Julianus Vatinius showed up with all his men, looked around and was like, where the hell's Connor? Connor, meanwhile, is sleeping with Julianus Vatinius' wife, because this was all a setup to allow him to do that. If there were actually a future Fallout taking place in Europe, what kind of faction would you like to see and what would be its backstory? I think a natural major faction in a European Fallout that wouldn't really make so much sense in American Fallout would be twofold. There would be the police and there'd be farmers. And the reason why I say them in particular is because they're pretty much the only people in Britain who have got guns. Because we don't have many guns floating around, we don't have much in the way of weaponry floating around, full stop. So the police have got the monopoly on guns. So that could potentially go wrong very easily in a post-apocalypse. The police would logically become basically a very, very major power alongside the army, of course. So the police and the army having a monopoly on weaponry is very interesting. The only people outside of that sort of structure that have weaponry are pretty much farmers, who will very often have shotguns and what have you for pest control. So potentially those two factions could be very, very interesting and have a much more powerful significance in a European Fallout than they might do in an American Fallout, where it seems like in American Fallout, literally everybody's got guns. So that would potentially be, an interesting change in the balance of power. Chocolate digestives or custard creams? Not even difficult. Chocolate digestives every flipping time. What are the odds of a Pokemon Fire Red or Leaf Green Nuzlocke run? Honestly, while you will almost certainly see Pokemon on the channel at some point, now Nintendo have backed down, I'm not planning to do a Nuzlocke run because there's just so much I can do with the base games and just some self-imposed rules outside of Nuzlocke. Plus, I don't generally like doing runs where, I'm copying someone else's rules. I like coming up with my own rules. I like doing something a bit more original. So, expect to see a challenge run in Pokemon of some description. I do have an idea in mind. Don't want to say what it is just yet, but I do have an idea for something slightly ludicrous in mind, yes. Also, there was no question, but I just want to quickly say congratulations to Joshua O. Jones, who basically confirmed that, having got into studying ancient history, thanks to the Rome Total War playthrough, he's got an interview to study it at Cambridge University. So, congratulations, just getting the interview full stop is an achievement with Cambridge and Oxford, and good luck with it. I hope you get in. Do you have any plans for new end cards at some point? Oh, I've been planning that for months. I know, there's not enough. There's nowhere near enough. I would love to create some new ones. I really do need to because they are repeated way too often. Yeah, what I'm planning, hopefully, is when we get to late December and probably more early January, because in late December, Claire's going to be on holiday for a bit, so it's just going to be me, so it might be a bit short-handed. In January, not much comes out. It'll be nice and quiet. I can do the new channel trailer, because we really need a new channel trailer, and I can make a bunch of new end cards. So, watch this space. I'm hoping to introduce a whole bunch of new ones in January. I know, there's been nowhere near enough for ages. John, will you be doing a proper playthrough of Holy Fury when the main Crusader Kings series is over? Not immediately, because I do like letting games have a little bit of a rest between their runs. But Crusader Kings 2 will 100% be back with Holy Fury, quite possibly a Byzantium run, because I like the sound of this new Imperial Authority succession thing that those guys are stuck with. That sounds kind of fun, so watch this space, it will return one day. If you had a device that let you converse with an animal, what animal would you speak to, and what would you ask it or talk about? Well, obviously Tabby. Just so we could communicate to her, because I assume it works two ways, that she's the best cat and she has a fluffy tummy. The main thing, however, is we'd like Tabby to tell us what she is and isn't comfortable with, because she's a bit of a traumatised cat. You know, she's very skittish, she spent a couple of years homeless, so it would be nice for Tabby to be able to tell us how we can, make life better for her, what we can do so she's more comfortable. So basically, I just want to chat to Tabby so she can tell us how we can be better owners to her. Question to both of you, what do you think of the Discworld novels? Favourite books and characters? Ooh, interesting. In fact, I'm actually doing a bit of a Terry Pratchett reread right now. I do occasionally do that just because I love them, absolutely adore them. For me, favourite character is Vimes. I love the Vimes books. The Guards books are always my favourites. As for which one's my favourite, though, that's really difficult. I know a lot of people seem to consider Nightwatch their absolute favourite. I actually think possibly my favourite might actually be Thud, which is not often kind of mentioned among the best of them, but I really like Thud. I think Thud is a really, really excellent book with a lot of fun little kind of sub-characters floating around in it. So, I'll say that. I'll go for the Guards books with Thud as probably my favourite. Over to you, Claire.
Ooh, it is really hard to choose a favorite book, although I have to say I do love Nightwatch a lot. I love time travel, and I love the fact that it's got all these Les Mis references in it, so it is very much one of my favorites. I also really, really love the Tiffany Aching series. I think the Knack McFeagles are just hilarious and really cool, and Tiffany is a great character as well. I have to confess, though, that I wasn't able to finish the Tiffany Aching series as of yet, because it is, the last book that Terry Pratchett wrote, and I don't really want to, run out of Terry Pratchett books to read, so I do have some more Discworld books to read, and I'm kind of saving them for later, so that I don't run out quite yet of new-to-me Terry Pratchett books.
Would you consider doing some popular Pokemon ROM hacks, like, for example, Pokemon Crystal Clear? I think we'll have our hands full just doing the basic Pokemon games without getting into ROMs, don't worry. Maybe a long way down the line when I've done every Pokemon game we can get into ROM hacks. But honestly, I've never seen a a ROM hack being mentioned or discussed where it actually looks like it's a really cool thing I'd be interested in. For the most part, they don't seem like they're the very highest quality. I'd be more interested in just covering the base games, to be honest. And with Stellaris 2.2 coming out soon, as well as Megacorp, you plan to record another game? Yes, as you probably saw 3 days ago, absolutely flippin' love 2.2, it's brilliant. John, what's your favourite English county? Well, obviously Cornwall. No, seriously, Cornwall's fascinating. I stand by all the things I said at the beginning of Crusader Kings 2. I wasn't just saying that to introduce Cornwall. Cornwall is just culturally fascinating. The fact that it's somehow managed to keep hold of parts of its own culture and parts of its own language, like a millennium after it stopped being any form of significant independent power. It's managed to hold on to certain aspects of its own cultural identity. It's just a really cool county. John, more of a comment than a question. Are you aware in Hitman you don't need to actually go over to the tapes in order to delete security footage? You can just shoot them with a silenced pistol. I am, but silenced pistols actually work a bit more like silenced pistols in the real world than in computer games in Hitman, which is they're not actually silenced. If you fire a silenced weapon, people in the same room or like one room over will absolutely hear it and come and investigate and wake up if they're asleep and all of that business and know something's wrong. It just means that, like, you know, people can't hear you on the very far side of the level. So that's why I always go and do it by hand. What are your thoughts on Pokemon Let's Go? Haven't actually played it yet, so I'm afraid I'm unable to comment. I mean, it looks fun. It looks sweet and fun from what I've seen, and I do have fond memories of the first generation of Pokemon. I don't actually have a Switch. If I had a Switch, I'd probably get it, to be honest, yes, but I can't really comment on it in great detail. Will you finish the house from your last House Flipper stream? What I'll probably do is I'll finish it off stream and then show it off at the beginning of the stream, then immediately sell it in order to fund the next house. Just because, yeah, there's been a bit of a gap now between the last stream and this coming one. But there are plans for House Flipper to return. Watch this space. What sort of challenge runs are you considering for your Pokemon playthrough? No. Just like I said before, spoilers, sweetie. I'm not discussing that just yet, but I do have one in mind. I'm just not ready to quite discuss it just yet. Any plans to play Battletech with the new DLC? Honestly, no. I thought Battletech was fine. It was pretty good. It's not a game I loved enough that I'd go back and revisit the DLC, because generally I don't really go back and look at games with DLC unless I really love them, or they're like, you know, core games to the channel. So Fallout will pretty much always get its DLC covered. Anything else, I need to really love that game to go and look at the DLC. So no current plans, I'm afraid. Do you feel the increasing trend of sell it now, we'll patch it later, and the whole use of first day and first week patching is hurting the industry, especially on consoles? Now, that's a very interesting perspective, because I don't really feel this as a problem, because one, I do almost everything on PC, and two, we've got pretty darn fast, reliable internet. So for me, like, when there's like even big patches, I can download them in not much time at all. So I don't really feel this as a problem. But on the occasional times I have to, you know, crack open the PS4 in order to play a PS4 exclusive, bloody hell, the PSN is slow. The PlayStation Network is so slow. Like, I can understand how people, especially on PlayStation, could be incredibly frustrated by needlessly large patches and why that would really have left a bad taste in the mouth, particularly for PlayStation Fallout 76 players very recently. Because, you know, they had to download the whole game, then they had to basically download the equivalent of the entire game again as a patch, which is not good. And, you know, when you've just actually bought a physical copy of a game, plenty of physical copies don't actually have the game on it anymore. They've just got a tiny file that gives the PS4 permission to download the digital version. So you may as well have just bought the digital version, because that would have just saved you the step of going to the store. I can see why console users would be annoyed by it, yes. I personally don't run into it as a problem, but I can fully understand why some people, under some circumstances, if you've got capped internet or slow internet, or your internet's being artificially slowed down by the limitations of the actual kind of console network that you're downloading it from, yeah, I can understand why many people would have a problem with that, absolutely. Do you watch anime? Honestly, no. Barely any at all, ever. Like, well over a decade ago, like, I watched, like, little random bits of Dragon Ball Z, but that was a long time ago. I just never really got so into it, to be honest. I'm pretty sure the same's true for Claire as well, so I'm afraid I cannot give you a favourite. When playing games like Fallout 76, do you plan the episodes, or just go where the game takes you? Interesting question. I do try and, well, I don't really plan ahead of time, because 76 I can't, because I don't know what's coming up. When I just kind of see the shape of the game around me, what I always try and do is, I like in any given video for there to be a bit of story progress, and a good bit of action. I want that to be a good, action thing of some description, whether that's like, a big battle in a strategy game, or like, a major interesting fight against a tough opponent in a Fallout game, something like that. I want that to be action, and I want that to be progress. I want that to be fun stuff on like both of those fronts. So in 76, I can't always know where that's going to happen, and you can sometimes tell when I've struggled to find stuff that I'm happy with, because that's when the episodes will be really long. Because if the episode goes long, that probably means I've got to the normal point I'd stop recording, and I've thought, okay, I'm not happy here. There's not enough good stuff. I want that to be a fun, interesting, visually distinct area in this. I want that to be a really big fight. We haven't had enough story stuff yet, whether that's like main story or environmental storytelling. I want some bit of actual interesting story in this episode. So I try and include a little bit of all of the above, and if I don't find them, I'll keep going until I do. So I don't really plan these things. I don't really know exactly where I'm going to end up, but I don't stop until I feel like I've got enough stuff to make an interesting episode that actually works on multiple levels, is kind of how I look at things. Are you planning any community playdays for Fallout 76 on Xbox One? Not just this moment, but when we next do a community playdate, I believe we are... Yeah, we should definitely go back onto console, because I believe the last two have both been on PC. So it would probably be the turn of console. It's probably really the turn of the PlayStation. Hang on, when we originally did the GTA day... No, that was PS4. You're probably right. It's probably the Xbox's turn. Yes, so basically, we'll probably do something on Xbox at some point. I don't know exactly where or when, but it would make sense that it would be Fallout 76, because I do actually have that on Xbox One. So at some point, maybe yes, but I don't know exactly when. How big is your Christmas tree? Not very tall at all at the minute, because it's on its side in the cupboard, because we haven't put it up yet. And what's your favourite decoration? Honestly, we don't actually have, like, many distinct decorations, so I don't really have, like, one that I look at and think, this is my favourite decoration. Because, like, we put, like, tinsel around it, we put lights around it, and we've got, like, a set of different baubles. So, I'm afraid I don't have, like, a single special decoration, because we don't, like, have loads of individual decorations we hang up. So, I'm afraid I don't really have one. I just like the effect in general. My 9-year-old is a fan of yours, always asking if we can watch the channel, and she's doing a book report on Julius Caesar. Do you have any little-known facts about him that I can share with her? It's not exactly little-known, but I still think it is quite interesting. It's not hugely widely known. We know Caesar was not in the best of health. For some reason or another, he did suffer from seizures on occasion. We're pretty certain of that, and we don't quite know what was wrong with him. The long-running theory was epilepsy, but since then other people have put forward alternative theories based on what we know of the symptoms, what's been recorded by history. So yeah, some people have put forward some alternative suggestions. But yeah, we're pretty confident that Caesar did suffer from seizures and may possibly have suffered from epilepsy. Hit me up with your favourite common mistake about Athenian culture or history. Probably just, well, I'm not sure if this is a common mistake, but there's certainly a bit of romanticism of Athenian democracy, which was not very democratic. Alright, there wasn't a huge amount of democracy going on in Athenian democracy. I mean, okay, people get to vote, but only certain people. Only certain people. Only male adult citizens. And of course there's other ways it got filtered down as well, which is because in order to vote you actually had to be physically present, people who were too busy having to go and actually work somewhere during the day were sometimes missing for important votes. And this is something that was kind of parodied and mocked by Aristophanes in his play The Wasps, where he basically pointed out that it was actually a problem in Athens. So obviously this was a comedy, so it's probably exaggerated. But there's always a grain of truth in comedy, which is the origin of the expression, many a true word is spoken in jest, which is the origin of this channel's name. So, we're all going in big circles in here, circles and circles. But yeah, in the play The Wasps, he kind of raised the problem that there was a group of grumpy old men, basically retired Athenian citizens, who would always show up and would vote in a particular way as a voting bloc. and that was not healthy for the democracy because it meant their opinions were being overrepresented in the political decisions that were being made in Athens. So very often major decisions that could have a huge impact on the ancient world were being made by an incredibly small subset of an already small subset of the population that was actually resident in Athens. So Athenian democracy was very not democratic. It was definitely not some wonderful utopian experiment. John, have you ever listened to much, if any, Muse, an English alt-rock band? I'm sure I must have heard some of their songs, 'cause I've heard the name, and they're not a small deal. Not a fan myself as far as I'm aware, again, unless, like, various songs I've heard happen to be them, but I don't think so. Old friend of mine from school many years ago I know was super into them, but alt-rock isn't really my kind of thing for the most part. As a classicist, what are your thoughts on the whole Greece versus Macedonia debate regarding the Macedonian... Oh, no. I'm not touching that one with a 10-foot pole. I am well aware that, yeah, feeling is very strong on both sides. Like, there are people who take that stuff very seriously. I don't flipping dare hold an opinion on that because it would be a very ill-informed opinion. So I'm staying the hell away from that question. No, sorry. That's what I'm not answering. Just on the off chance it really upsets someone. Also, any chance of an Eternal Darkness run now you can play Nintendo games? I would not bet against it. It's one of those games that I've wanted to do in the past, so watch this space. It is definitely one of the ones I'll be getting to earlier rather than later. Now we can do Nintendo's second-party stuff. Do you think it's time for Bethesda to finally create a new game engine for all future releases after all the problems experienced with 76? No, not really. In fact, one of the things that's really annoying about the discussion about 76 is clearly at some point a couple of people at the beginning of the chatter said, oh yeah, the creation engine's so old, that's the problem. And a load of people have just basically latched onto that and repeated it as a talking point, despite the fact that, you know, large numbers of game engines go through huge numbers of iterations and technically are in some form or another, Theseus problem notwithstanding, the same engine as they have been for a very, very long time indeed. Plenty of engines are very, very old indeed. I do not have any particular reason to believe there is a fundamental problem in the creation engine. The same engine that created Morrowind going on to create Fallout 4 and Fallout 76, though again it's not really the same engine because so many bits have been swapped in and out and improvements and changes and diddly-diddly-dee. Clearly, engines can be upgraded and improved and have bits taken out and have other bits plugged in and improved over time. And what it can produce now is hugely more impressive than what it could produce once upon a time. If there are problems with Fallout 76, honestly, I suspect more of the problems are tied to the fact that they had to take this thing and try and wire it into online, and that was the bigger technical challenge. I strongly suspect that, you know, with some further improvements and polish, the creation engine could keep working just fine for the future. I think the case that this is all the fault of the creation engine, and if they just built a new engine, this wouldn't be happening, is massively overstated, and not really the true culprit at all. To be honest, I think that point has been very overstressed by the internet community in recent days. 2 suggestions. Factorio, very much got that one in mind. Suspect it would make a good streamer a one-off at some point. That's very much on my radar. One I'm less familiar with though, Creeper World 3, an RTS where the enemy is a fluid goo that obeys physics but is otherwise mindless. That does sound fun actually, I might give that one a little look-see. And if you were on death row, what would your last meal be? Cyanide. I'd request cyanide, because seriously, you want to put me in a room behind a glass pane in front of a group of people? No, screw you. I'm going to request cyanide. You probably won't give it to me, but if you have to give me anything, I'm going to request cyanide, because I'd rather just kind of die privately, like in a cell, by myself, than literally being paraded in front of a booth full of people who apparently want to watch me die for some reason. No. If I have to die, I'd rather do it on my own terms, so whatever I can get my hands on that would be guaranteed to kill me. John, wondering if Fallout 4 is better than you think is still kicking around? Yeah. In fact, large parts of it are not quite scripted, but planned. So it's not happening anytime soon, just because we are so far behind with normal videos. But yes, it is absolutely going to happen, 100%. How much of your recording schedule got thrown out after you saw Nintendo's announcement? Very little, to be honest, just because we've got so much stuff on at the minute. I didn't actually have space to suddenly introduce a whole bunch of Nintendo stuff. I mean, I literally don't own a Switch, and we need to arrange that. And yeah, older games are a bit harder to record, full stop, so we'll need to find out what the right solution to that is. So yeah, it didn't actually make a huge change immediately. Expect to start seeing Nintendo stuff maybe starting to appear in January. I don't think we're in a desperate rush. John, I've got another fuck, marry, kill game for you. So, on this occasion, we've got Dr. Evil from Austin Powers, the 11th Doctor, or just Matt Smith if you prefer, and George Washington, the first President of the United States. How the hell did you come up with that list? Okay. I guess we have to kill Dr. Evil, because he's the one who is actively evil and would like to blow up the world or hold it to ransom or whatever. So then it's just a question of who out of Matt Smith and or the 11th Doctor, George Washington, would like to marry or fuck. You see, the problem is, the 11th Doctor did get married, and I don't really want River Song on my bad side. But then again, the 11th Doctor also has access to like all sorts of future medicine, but also hygiene, which George Washington didn't. So I'm guessing George Washington might not necessarily be nice to hang around with, so he probably smelt quite a lot of sweat and whatever. So I guess by default we'll accept fuck George Washington, purely to marry the 11th Doctor. I'm a bit worried that River Song would do terrible things to me if I tried to marry the 11th Doctor. But you know what? He's probably the most pleasant of the bunch. Well, actually, I don't know George Washington personally, but I always liked Matt Smith as the Doctor, so I'm going to say that. Can we have a sneak peek into the next month of videos? Okay, some fun highlights in terms of the one-offs that are currently planned for the next month. Mutant Year Zero coming up next week. Ooh, Prey's picking up its multiplayer object hunt thing called Typhon Hunter, so 100% we'll be giving that a little bit of a look-see. Red Dead Online, obviously, will be giving that a look too. And something I've been meaning to get to for a while, this will probably get bumped in favour of something else, but I am planning to look at Railway Empire, which has been out for a very long time indeed. I've just been meaning to get round to it, and I like train games. So yeah, those are 4 videos currently planned for one-offs over the next month. John, what's your opinion on government gridlock? Here in the US, some people actually prefer gridlock, as they say it's preventing either party from making radical changes to the country. I can't really comment on gridlock specifically in the US, but I do recall that I think it was Belgium recently in Europe actually basically got by without a government for quite some period of time, and apparently people were quite happy with it. It worked pretty well. So yeah, clearly for some people it works. Astroneer version 1.0 is finally due in February. Ooh, I did not know that. Fine. Yeah, if Astroneer is actually properly launching, 100% that gets a video. Will we ever see Rollercoaster Tycoon back on the channel? Well, we did just have Parkitect back, so yeah, if people are in the mood for some classic park building stuff, Parkitect is honestly just a remade version of Rollercoaster Tycoon 2. They're very similar, so hopefully that will help scratch that itch for you. I'm disappointed by the lack of an open plan bathroom in the new and improved John Penny Tower. When is that getting added? Well, good news, as someone actually did point out to you, I have just recently acquired the plans for a toilet, so John Penny Tower 3.0, I think, will most definitely contain some form of open plan bathroom. When are we getting Fallout 4 You Only Live Once? I do not know exactly. However, I would anticipate it would probably be early in 2019. I would say. It's likely to become a main run in 2019. Though, then that kind of depends whether I decide to do Fallout 2 at the same time. I could do Fallout 2 at the same time. I don't know, basically. I do not know. The 2 big ones that are on the horizon are Fallout 2 and Fallout 4 You Only Live Once. I just don't know which is going to come first. Hitman 2 briefcase only run? Question mark? Honestly, would be kind of difficult because the briefcase can't actually kill anyone. It can only knock them unconscious. So if I was allowed to drag them around and put them in blenders afterwards or whatever, that might work. But as far as I'm aware, it would be physically impossible to actually do a briefcase only run using exclusively the briefcase. Because yeah, it would actually have no way of killing the targets. Do you hunt for trophies and achievements in games? And if so, what trophies are you most proud of getting? Honestly, I really don't. Like, I really do not care about, like, achievements and trophies in the slightest. I've never been an achievement hunter at all. Like, I'm pretty sure, like, the games I love most in the world, I probably don't actually have the achievements for them because I just don't even check, to be honest. So there's probably a bunch of, like, Steam achievements for the various Fallouts I don't have yet. I honestly don't know. I've never even looked. It just isn't a thing that's ever really concerned me, to be honest. John, what kind of drunk are you? Sleepy, angry, loud, etc.? I'm going to say affectionate, okay? Very affectionate. I think for the most part, I just get very friendly and enjoy hugging people when I'm drunk. I have many, many treasured photos from my time at university where basically I've had a few to drink and basically I just end up draped around people, giving them big hugs. Some lovely photos there, some of my fondest memories, in fact. So yes, I'm going to say friendly. Given that Fallout exaggerates the American 50s mid-century modern outlook, how do you think Fallout in the UK would theoretically differ if you ever got your UK Fallout game? I suppose probably we might go the other way. Like, a fun way to take it might be to take, like, British repression and stiff upper lip and take that to an extreme, which is kind of, I suppose, the sort of idea that We Happy Few was playing with, which, while that is a flawed game, was a fun jumping off point for a game, I'd say. So, yeah, maybe take it the same sort of conceptual direction as We Happy Few did, whereas playing with British repression and the stiff upper lip idea. John, I've no clue what to get my dad for Christmas. Any wild and wonderful suggestions? Socks. I know it sounds really boring, but, like, socks are genuinely universally useful. I can never have enough socks. Socks are great. When I was young, socks seemed like such a boring present, but now I'm old and boring. I now know socks are the best present in the world. Just get, like, infinite socks. Socks are great. John, have you ever considered doing a regular gaming podcast? Well, I used to do the Podcasts, of course, which was effectively that, which was very, very good fun. Had a lot of fun doing that, but honestly, they take a lot of time to put together, and if I was to actually run my own, I'd need to, like, arrange the guests and handle, like, the diary keeping, or I'd have to delegate that to Claire, and then she'd have less time to do her normal stuff, so they're a lot of work, to be honest. Like, we put out a lot of videos, and very long videos as well, so honestly, I think we'd struggle to have time for it. I mean, you know, it would be nice if we could. Like, that's why the podcast worked well, because then I was just a regular guest on someone else's podcast, which worked pretty well, but I think I'd struggle to actually have capacity to arrange my own at this point. John, I'm a big fan of old ghost stories and many types of folklore, and recently I came across an old Victorian-era story that caused mass hysteria in England, that of Spring-Heeled Jack. Ah, yes! I do know a little bit about Spring-Heeled Jack. This is really fun because, of course, the stories got conflated with Jack the Ripper. And some people think they're the same story, but they're not. They're totally unrelated. Jack the Ripper, of course, is the serial killer many people are familiar with. Spring-Heeled Jack is a sort of weird, like, pseudo-demonic entity, where it's like a vaguely human goblin, demon creature, people are unclear, where its thing seems to be like there's a flash of smoke and then it bounces up onto the roofs, like Spring Heel, as in it can jump really, really high. So this demon that stalked the streets of London, and if it was ever cornered, would just like jump up onto the roofs and escape over the rooftops. And I don't recall it ever having any particular sort of origin or anything, so I guess you could possibly like count it as cryptozoology, because it might be deemed like, you know, an unknown monster of some description. But yeah, I don't know much about its origins, or if there's any particular, like, you know, detailed look into it, like anyone at the time actually wrote anything about it, investigating it in the slightest. But I am familiar with the story of Spring-Heeled Jack, and I like how, yeah, it kind of got a bit confused and conflated later, despite originally being a totally unrelated kind of cryptozoology thing, totally distinct from the serial killer Jack the Ripper. Have you noticed a Fallout 76 related change in the channel's metrics? Not hugely, to be honest. Fallout 76 is a Fallout game, gets good views, so views are looking good for November. I think I've seen I've not seen the actual confirmed files. I've seen like the first draft of the files at this exact moment in time. It takes YouTube a few days to catch up, so I'm not sure if I've actually seen the absolute definite confirmed files yet. But yeah, honestly, it's behaving pretty much as I would have expected. In fact, I'm actually going to skip to a different question that's in the list right now, which is someone was saying how I thought Fallout 76 was doing versus like different Fallout series that I've done in the past. It's kind of hard to tell. You see, the thing is, the first part of Fallout 76, and there's multiple first parts, because I did West Virginia, then I did the Xbox beta, then I did, like, the PC version. Like, that's on, like, 150,000 views, and it's been out for, like, less than a month. Now, my first part of Fallout 4 is only on about 300,000 odd views. Hang on, maybe it's more like 300 and... It's less than 400,000 anyway, so... For something that's only been out a month, that's doing well. That'll probably be on track to overtake Fallout 4 eventually. But Fallout 4 Survival Mode, the series, the first part of that has over 1 million views. So sometimes it depends. You don't always get it right first time. And sorry, getting it right first time is totally the wrong expression there, because I'm not saying that Survival Mode was more right than my first playthrough. It's just sometimes you just happen to get the algorithm in YouTube spot on, not on your first actual playthrough. So that might not necessarily be the best thing I ever make in Fallout 76. Like, maybe there's going to be one of those special events Bethesda's going to launch in 2019 or going forward, and I'll make a mini-series of that, and that mini-series will get way more views for some reason, or there'll be a new mode, and I'll look at that new mode, like, I'll do a mini-series looking at Hunter x Hunter, and that will get way, way, way more views than the actual main series. You can't tell, because, yeah, the first ever series I did in Fallout 4 didn't do as well as subsequent stuff. Fallout 76 could do the same. It looks pretty promising so far. It's doing fine in the numbers. It's not necessarily blowing me away. Honestly, Fallout 4 Survival Mode will honestly be tough for it to beat, but it's doing just fine for the time being. John, any thoughts on whether you might do a Christmas live stream this year? Quite possibly yes, but I don't know exactly when or what. I need to actually look into exactly when Claire is and isn't on the clock to verify that. So there'll be something around that area. I don't know exactly what it's going to be though. John, have you seen Wonder Woman? And if so, what did you think of it? I liked it. I liked it a lot. I will say I think like the final battle at the airport was a bit underwhelming and the ending in general was a bit blah, but the setup was fun and the stuff like in No Man's Land and the trenches and the village was really fun, and like the fight where she fought the guy in like the tower and like, you know, stormed the building. There was lots of really good stuff in the first and second act that I'm willing to forgive it for having a slightly flimsy third act. In some ways, I felt like it kind of ran out of steam before the end. But yeah, I thought it was a really, really damn good movie overall. I'd totally check out Wonder Woman 2. How long do you see Fallout 76 going on for? Bethesda having said they want people to be playing it forever. Well, forever doesn't really mean forever, of course, because sooner or later they'll shut down the servers. I'll be very interested to see what Bethesda decide to do here, because based on the reality that's existed so far, insofar as the reviews, and, well, I cannot confirm how well it's sold, but various bits of information I've seen suggest that it has not sold spectacularly. So the player base and thus the amount of money it's going to be generating is probably not what they were hoping for. And that means there's not a terrible chance that they might at some point decide to cut their losses earlier than they were planning to. Now, to save face, they can't do it immediately, and they've probably got a whole bunch of stuff already in development they may as well finish up and release, but I wouldn't necessarily be like overwhelmingly surprised. I'd be disappointed, but I wouldn't be surprised if, say, by the end of 2019 or early in 2020 or whatever, they said, okay, actually, we're going to wrap this up now. We've done the stuff we originally planned for like the first big phase of launches, and that's going to be it. They might leave the servers on for a fair bit of time after that, but they might stop developing new stuff. I hope they don't do that. I hope instead they put a lot of time and effort and thought into how to fix it, and it does last for years and years and years, but I wouldn't put money on it. I just don't know, because from a pure business decision perspective, they might at some point decide to cut their losses. John, I wanted to ask about your impressions of the recent co-optional podcast appearance, as I personally felt you were slightly thrown to the wolves. Even though you made some good arguments, two of the hosts seemed slightly zoned out, and Jenna wasn't that interested in what you had to say. I didn't really get that impression from it, to be honest. I mean, I feel like Dodger is just not really that interested in that franchise at all, and maybe Jesse isn't huge either. So maybe that was just a discussion between me and Jenna. Clearly she has a strong opinion in one direction. I wouldn't say I had a strong opinion in the other, but we were still a long distance away from each other. And I don't think it was quite as you've characterised it there. I will say, like, after the actual stream, I think Jenna had, like, signed off first. Jesse said to me that actually he thought I'd done a really good job representing Fallout 76, because he actually said, okay, it sounds like some people are actually going to check that out. Like, Jenna might give it another go based on what you've said. So I don't think they were unfair. I will say it's not the normal tone of thing that I'm involved with, because generally I don't really attach myself to projects that are focused on the negative. I prefer to focus on the positive. If I've not got anything nice to say about a game, there just won't be a video, full stop. So I can see why some people from my community might go over and watch me there and think this doesn't feel quite right to me, because tonally it's very different to what I might put together. But that's fine. That's the thing about like collaborations and going on other people's podcasts. Sometimes it's going to be something a little bit different. Some people really like the work I do with Dan. Some people aren't so keen on the work I do with Dan. They don't like what Dan adds into the videos. Personally, I think we've got a really fun chemistry where each of us can add something to the other's style and create something a bit interesting and unique and fun, and most people seem to really like it. So I can see how you'd come to that sort of view, but I wouldn't have characterised it like that. I don't think it was me being thrown to the wolves in the slightest. Apart from Gotham, do you watch any other DC TV shows currently airing, like Arrow, The Flash, Supergirl, League of Tomorrow? I do not. I have been meaning to get into The Flash, because The Flash looks fun to me, and seems to be fairly well regarded. So at some point I would like to catch up with The Flash, but I've not seen a single episode of any of them right now, I'm afraid. As an English expat in the US, this time of year my mind strays to the important things. What is your go-to mince pie of choice? Ooh. Honestly, I'm clearly not a big enough connoisseur of mince pies. I don't have a mince pie of choice. I've never even thought about it. I'd probably just like go to Mark's and pick up just a box of their own brand mince pies. So I'm afraid I don't really know. I do not know. I'm so sorry. Clearly you are much more of an expert in the field than I am. What aspects of Crusader Kings 2 are you most hoping to see in Imperator? The character focus. Because one of the things about Stellaris, I love Stellaris, is you never get personally attached to anybody. Like, when a scientist dies, it's unfortunate if he's a really good scientist. When a leader dies, it's unfortunate if they're a very good leader. But for the most part, they're easily replaceable. They're just basically a series of stats and traits attached to an individual. You never get attached to a lineage in any way. So yeah, I would like there to be more of a character focus. Maybe there to be, more of a focus on families and dynasties and that sort of thing. If there could be more of that sort of thing in Imperator, that'd be marvellous, because that really facilitates the role play for me. So I'm really hoping that's what it's like. John, were you aware that in Fallout 76 you can set up a farming machine for junk? Yes, indeed, and it's actually the reason why my favourite location to actually go and farm if I can get hold of it is the Charleston Junkyard, which appears to be the only workshop there's ever any competition for whatsoever. I've never seen any competition for any workshops, with the exception of the Charleston Junkyard, which has 3 junk sorters in it, which I think is the highest number in the game. So people do seem to like going to take that one. I think there's 1 junk sorter in Sunshine Tidings, the food place just down from Flatwoods, and also there's an aluminium mine there, so that's a nice one you can take nice and early as well. But yeah, Charleston Junkyard is amazing, but I'm never going to mention it in the main series because more people might start going there. As you say, it's going to be like the weight room debacle all over again. Mr. John, your channel seems to have the jubilation of a runaway pillow fight. Why are you so positive? That's kind of picking up a point I was mentioning earlier there. Yeah, my general view is, like, I've always wanted the channel to be positive. Like, when I set it up, that was when British Guy is cynical and rants about things was really at its peak on the internet, like 5-6 odd years ago. So I really wanted something to be super positive. So I've kind of just taken that through, and it has been very intentionally curated that if there's, nothing nice to say about a game, I probably just won't say anything at all. And while I'm very happy to make constructive criticism and point out the stuff that I think does need to be fixed, and I think I can be harsh but fair if a game's disappointed me, yeah, for the most part, I do still try and stay focused on the positives. So that is something I have intentionally curated, yes. Have you seen a spike in subscribers from your appearance on the Co-optional podcast? No. Maybe an absolutely tiny one, but honestly, like, we get a lot more when I do alternating videos with Dan. Like, there was a very clear major sub spike after the first episode went out of Cats, and then when the first episode went out on my channel, and again on the 3rd episode. So yeah, that's been much better for the channel in terms of just pure sub numbers than the co-optional was. If France is New Cornwall, what would New Cornwall be? Probably Aragon, given it kind of slipped through our fingers last time, so I'd like to think in the future, Oh Dear the Great will find a way of securing it. John, I'm enjoying Fallout 76 so far. Am I playing it wrong? It's quite a good joke given the state of the internet and its discussions about 76. No, you are having fun. The important thing is you found something that you find fun, so go have fun with it. How have you felt about the Hitman 2 release with all the levels unlocked? I noticed you were a bit less confident in the elusive target than your previous videos. Yeah, honestly, I was like one of the few people that said all along back at Hitman 2016, the episodic format worked really well for Hitman, because it basically meant that you had to repeatedly play the level because you were waiting for the next episode, so rather than just kind of rushing on to the next level, you'd actually spend some time learning the first level. But as it is, I kind of, played the first level once, then the second level once, third level once, fourth level once, etc, etc. And then by the time I came back to the first level, I'd forgotten some of the stuff I'd already learned, because these are big, complicated, intricate levels. But when it was episodic, and you played the first level through multiple times, then you learnt it so well, it got burned into your brain, that even when you actually came back to it later, you already knew it really well. So, honestly, I think Hitman worked as an episodic game, damn it, but clearly lots of people did not agree, and it annoyed them, so as a result of that, we've now got Hitman as a normal release, which I suppose is clearly what the people want, so it is what the people shall get. But yeah, I actually genuinely feel it actually worked better in episodic games, so no matter. Do you get a say in what sort of adverts play before your video starts? No. None whatsoever. Literally no say. I mean, I guess I gently influence it because there are kind of areas in the back end of YouTube where I can say, okay, what is my channel about and what is this video I'm showing you of? Where I say, okay, it's a game and it's this game if it's part of the list that YouTube tries to keep up to date, and for the most part it does. So YouTube knows what the video is and therefore tries to show an ad that it thinks is relevant. But yeah, some people do create some very dubious ads, shall we say, and if they choose to target those at my sorts of videos, I do not get to say. There's literally nowhere in the back end of YouTube where I can say, on my channel, never show this ad. That functionality only exists on the user end, where you can say, never show me this sort of ad no matter what video I'm looking at, but I can't actually block certain ad types from ever appearing on my video, or rest assured, I'd be doing it to a lot of them, but sadly, literally impossible, cannot do it. What keeps you up at night? Most literally, the occasional fox that comes and makes an ungodly racket not too far from the window. There is certainly a fox that is very noisy somewhere around here, and it is very annoying. I'm going to be taking a solo trip to England in a few weeks. Any recommendations for good food or less well-known but interesting things to check out while I'm there? Ooh, okay. I don't know whether you count this as good food or not, but I really like the restaurant Yalla Yalla in London. There's a few branches dotted around London. It's Lebanese food. I know it's weird to come to England and then eat Lebanese food, but I think it's really good, alright? And maybe you don't normally get the chance to eat Lebanese unless you're from Lebanon. But if you're not from Lebanon, maybe eat at Yalla Yalla, because I think it's really damn good. If I'm ever in the very centre of London, I totally try and eat at Yalla Yalla if I can, because it's bloody great. I absolutely flippin' love it. Have you ever accidentally started recording a video without turning on your mic or recording software? I think the worst I did recently was, one of the episodes of Crusader Kings 2, I got 20 minutes in before I realised that, the recording was all on, but I realised that there was still that little Steam announcement, whatever it says. There's one that's like, hey, press, whatever it is, Shift-Tab to open up the Steam overlay, because there's multiple codes you might need to enter, because DLC, diddly-diddly-dee. And it was just there in the corner, and it really flipping bugged me. So luckily I still had the actual save file I'd loaded from, so I literally just redid the first 20 minutes of that episode. So that was annoying. It was actually, it was all recording, it's just it was recording something it wasn't supposed to record. Let's ask on Claire's behalf, what do you want for Christmas? Luckily, Claire does not need the help. Claire's way ahead of the game. Claire's found stuff and got me presents and whatever. I haven't done any of my Christmas shopping yet. It's kind of snuck up on me that, it's actually early December now, so I really need to actually get a bit of a move on in terms of presents for my family and Claire and whatnot, yes. How about a revival of Why Not Wednesday with more various one-off games from your long list? Well, Why Not Wednesday kind of won, to be honest. It's not Why Not Wednesday anymore, but it's just all over the shop. I was mentioning earlier, there's a plan for a one-off where I just look at Railway Empire, and I think currently it's scheduled for a Tuesday, not a Wednesday, but effectively, that's a Why Not Wednesday, because it's a one-off game of a previous generation that, were it placed on Wednesday, would be Why Not Wednesday. But now there's just kind of one-offs all over the shop. Not so much in the past couple of weeks, just because there's been so much Fallout floating around, because there's been a new Fallout game. But if you kind of look at, say, September, and October, there's a huge number of one-offs everywhere. So kind of, why not Wednesday doesn't exist anymore? Because it doesn't need to exist anymore. Because now there's one-offs all over the shop. And that's kind of why it got retired. What's your favourite series you've ever done? Honestly, it's probably Crusader Kings 2. Insofar as, like, which I had the most fun actually making, Crusader Kings 2. Insofar as, like, my favourite series, that's probably still Fallout 3 Kill Everything. Fallout 3 Kill Everything, I think, is a wonderful series that came together just so damn well. And, like, really for me is, like, one of the big first moments I think I kind of figured out what made a Kill Everything run work and how I was going to get my personal sense of humour into a series of Fallout videos and stuff like that. Like, Fallout 3 Kill Everything was a big deal for me. But, like, probably the series I had the most fun recording, that was, like, the easiest and most kind of nice and relaxing and cool to record, was Crusader Kings 2. Because Fallout 3 took a huge amount of work and, like, reshoots and all sorts to actually get together. Like, that really came together on the edit, but it was a lot of work to actually kind of record the darn thing. Crusader Kings 2 was just so easy to put together. It was just a joy to put together. I had so much fun with that. What's your opinions on Texas? I lived there and was curious what you thought or knew about it. It's a state. It's in the south of the US. It's sort of diamond-shaped. It's warm there. There are cows and they live in ranches, and cowboys make sure they stay in the ranch. There's also oil, which fat men who wear hats get out of the ground in order to make money. That's literally all I know about Texas. At that point, we're completely done. I'm not joking. That's pretty much the entirety of my knowledge. If you were to weigh 99 kilograms, then ate 1 kilogram of nachos, would you then be 1% nacho? Yes, presumably, logically so. John, I was wondering if you were aware of Yandere Simulator. Yes, I am. In fact, I once tried to make a video of it from one of its, like, early alphas or something. The problem is the game is just not in a good state. It's very unfinished, it's very unpolished, it's very buggy, and the last time I tried to play it, which was admittedly some time ago, there just wasn't enough of a game there to actually make a good video. Like, I can see how it's kind of fun as an idea, where, yeah, you described as Hitman meets Panzermädels, and I can see why you kind of make those sorts of comparisons. But yeah, unfortunately the game was just so far off being finished and so scruffy and so incomplete, I just couldn't make a video out of it. I literally tried. I have tried to make a video out of it because I thought it might be fun, but no. The game is just not in a position to actually have a video made of it, unfortunately. The most crucially important question asked so far, this guy's asking the important questions. Have you and Claire given the proper scritchies to Tabby today? Claire, could you just step away from the editing for a second and make sure that you've gone and given Tabby some extra scritches, please? Thank you. Can we get a dating sim or two thrown in the next few months? I do have a couple that are just kind of sitting on the long list right now. So, during a quiet period in January where there's nothing coming out and nothing ever comes out in January, yeah, I wouldn't bet against actually me looking at one of them at some point. Did you not catch that the bully stealing your sweet roll in Crusader Kings 2 was basically the book scene in Fallout 3? I missed that there was a sweet roll involved. I saw there was a bully, but I just kind of skipped down to the actual solutions to it, involving punching him in the face. I didn't actually realise that, yeah, there was actually a sweet roll specifically involved, I'm afraid, so that was why I didn't point that out. I just missed that bit. What percentage of the time in Fallout 76 do you think you've spent over-encumbered? It's a good question. Probably about 5 to 10% of total, because honestly, when you go over encumbered, you just got to stay over encumbered until you actually happen to find a stash box, because at that point, you know, once you're 1 pound overweight, you may as well be 900 pounds overweight, so there's no difference whatsoever. So at that point, I just start picking up literally everything. So, yeah, probably, given there are sometimes extended periods when I'm over encumbered, 5 to 10% of total playtime seems reasonable. According to Schrodinger's cat, the fate of the cat's death is decided by the observer. If no one opens the box, i.e. observes, then the cat could be alive as well as dead, which gave me an idea. If you punch someone in the face and the person who gets punched shouts ow and gets angry, isn't it the victim's fault for observing the punch through one's own neural network and deciding that it hurts and that they should get angry? I mean, when babies trip and fall over, most of them cry after they observe they got hurt. I don't know how to respond to this, but I think I ought to put Claire in a box? Is that what you're saying? Yeah, let's just go put Claire in a box. Hang on. Sadly, Claire refused to get in a box. John, given your apparent enjoyment of the colonists, I think you should try Factorio. Yes, indeed. Second time Factorio gets brought up. It gets brought up a lot. I should really just do a Factorio live stream at some point. Watch this space. How do you handle inventory management or scrap in Fallout 76? I find I'm generally struggling with being near or at the weight limit. Well, actually, this question was actually made before we got the extra £200 in the stash box, and more is to come soon. So hopefully that'll have eased things a little bit. I found two things in particular. Well, actually three things. Let's talk about three things. One, I started off the game like storing all ammo types. I thought, oh, well, I'll, go over to a gun that uses this ammo type sooner or later. Don't do that. If you're not using an ammo type, just like dump it. It's fine. You can find plenty more. Ammo is not scarce. There's ammo flipping everywhere. Don't worry about that. Two, certain things you end up with way too much of. Like at one point I had like 2,000 steel in my stash box. So take that steel, just dump it on the ground. It's fine. Don't even bother like actually grouping it together into batches and then like selling it, because the plastic you'll lose doing that is worth more than the money you'll actually make by selling it. Just take it, dump it on the ground. Three, I find that gunpowder weighs me down a surprisingly large amount because gunpowder is surprisingly heavy. So make sure you're crafting ammo on a regular basis. In order to make sure that you can actually craft ammo, that means you need to have as much lead as you have gunpowder, which means, yes, securing those precious, precious gems and their precious, precious weights. That's very crucial indeed. I think if you kind of do those three things, dump unnecessary ammo, make sure you're constantly crafting useful ammo to burn through gunpowder, and just dumping excess very common materials like steel, that makes things a lot easier to manage. Why did you go to university to study classics? Was there a particular career you had in mind before? A career that a classics degree would be useful for. Yeah, whatever. Well, I suppose technically you could teach classics, which I did very briefly consider. But no, I only studied classics, so I was good at it. I was very, very good at it, so, it's a logical thing to do. If you're very good at a subject, it increases the chance you can get into a really good university to study it, and so it worked out for me. Did not have a plan. In fact, when I was in my final year at university and very shortly about to leave, I still didn't have a plan. I was woefully unprepared for the real world, so I'm very lucky I just sort of accidentally fell into marketing and did pretty well there. That was, very, very fortunate indeed. Also, in general, how was my day? Completely not where my day should be. It's miles off right now, like I was saying earlier. I didn't really get to begin work till noon, just because I had a bit of a lie-in because I was working till so late last night. And now it's 9 in the evening and I skipped lunch today and I'm still recording this, and more needs to be put out momentarily. So, actually, after I've done this, I need to edit tomorrow's Fallout 76. So I'm probably going to be working until at least midnight tonight. But then after last night, midnight just seems like luxury. So basically, my day is not where my day's supposed to be. My day's miles off right now. Another person picking up on the Nintendo change of policy. Have you ever played any of the mystery dungeon games? No, I totally missed them. I've never played one, so I can't say if it's going to be on the channel, because I don't know if I even like them. So at some point, maybe I'll give it a look-see on the handheld and see if it's something I'd vaguely consider moving onto the channel proper. What made you sweat more in Crusader Kings 2? When you suddenly had a gavel kind problem, or when the entire Cornish Empire, aside from yourself, wanted to go off-brand? Oh, that was fun, though. I mean, definitely it was, the massive rebellion where everyone joined a joint rebellion against me. But that was really fun. That's the sort of thing that I'm really glad happens in a playthrough, because it's different and it's interesting and it's tense. And it means the stakes have suddenly been elevated to the extent where, I could genuinely lose and have a monarch I wasn't expecting to lose actually be kicked off the throne. And that's cool. So, absolutely, that was the more nerve-wracking one. But, just from the point of view of a YouTuber, it's brilliant when that sort of stuff actually happens. And another Nintendo-related one. Sorry, I probably should have covered this at the beginning because, a lot of people racing this. Someone bringing up, of course, Smash Brothers Ultimate. Well, to be honest, I didn't really play many of the intervening Smash Brothers, so I actually was really damn good at Smash 64. So, despite not really playing much in the way of, Melee or Brawl or what have you, I'm just going to probably nip back into Ultimate at some point, and I'm sure not much has changed and I'll be able to get straight back. What do you mean 72,000 characters? Ooh, the Many a True Nerd coasters, someone's brought those up. We were almost there with them at some point, but we weren't happy with the quality. We just can't get coasters where we're happy with the quality. Every sample we keep seeing, they're really thin and flimsy, and they're not what we want at all. So, we were looking at this, but right now we're just completely snowed under. I might ask Claire to begin sourcing them again in the new year, but it's not coming imminently. Can we get a live stream of the colonists? Probably at some point, yes. I did have a lovely time with it. People seem to actually get on with it really well. It's not coming in the next couple of weeks, but there might be one before the end of the year, actually. I certainly do have it in mind. Could you sing happy birthday to my sister Elizabeth? Abso-flipping-lutely. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Elizabeth. Happy birthday to you. That was clapping at the end there, but I shouldn't do that because clapping sounds terrible on microphones. But that was me doing the clap at the end of the song. I'm moving to my first non-student rented house. Any advice for me? Oh, this is very practical, but if photos haven't been provided to you of every room, when you move in, take photos of everything. Because when you move out again, the person you're renting from might say, oh no, these curtains are really scruffy, so you're going to have to pay for them to be cleaned and that's going to have to come out of your deposit. But if you can actually prove what the state of the flat was when you moved in, then you've got a better defence against that. So take photos of everything now so the landlord can't try and rip you out of your deposit later. What would you say is the hardest part of running a community and a business at the same time? Probably the always-on nature of it. Just because, you know, you're always receiving emails, tweets, DMs, all sorts of stuff, comments are constantly coming in. Like, there's never really a moment you can just turn off. It's not like the channel runs from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. or anything. The channel is always on. So the moment I get up, I have to figure out, okay, has anything major happened overnight? You know, when I'm just sitting up in the evening, I'm keeping an eye on everything social. It's the fact that you never really have the chance to switch off, which is not a great hardship. You know, there's people who work in mines and die young from lung conditions and all of that business. Next to, like, huge numbers of people around the world, I'm ridiculously lucky. But there are absolutely downsides. I'd say the one is that you pretty much have to be on, like, 100% of the time. John, when using a public restroom, what are some rules everyone should follow? Okay, so, in the event of a row of urinals, obviously take the furthest one to either extreme. If someone's already on the furthest one to either extreme, you take the other extreme. If the two extremes are taken, you take the one in the middle, and so on and so forth, leaving the maximum amount of distance between you and everyone else that is possible. If you have just positioned yourself in a urinal position where there is less space between you and one person than there is between another person, you've just made the toilet weird. Alright? You've just made it weird. Don't do that. Put yourself equidistant inside the largest available space. That's how you do. I've just got into the Great British Bake Off. Do you and Claire watch it? And what are your thoughts? You know what? I'm just going to hand this one straight over to Claire. I often, I'm sitting there and it's on in the background for me. Claire's more into it than me. I'm going to pass over to Claire for this one.
Well, yeah, I love the Bake Off. It's very much up my alley. I watch a lot of cooking shows anyway, but this one is one of my favorites. I watch it pretty religiously, try to catch it like at the time that it's on as well, rather than on catch up, just so that I don't get spoiled on Twitter and so that I can live tweet my very important Bake Off opinions as well. If you're in the US, you might not have heard about this yet, but the Bake Off started on the BBC, which is a national TV network here in the UK, and then it was sold to Channel 4, which is a different private channel network, which has a lot of, really good programming, but they did make some changes to Bake Off that I didn't love. So it's different presenters now, and they are editing it quite differently. I think especially for John and I as video making people, it's really obvious that they are making it like a lot more dramatic, and they're keeping in a lot more shots of people crying and being really upset. Famously, the first two presenters, when it was on the BBC, would just stand around candidates when they were crying and they were upset and just swear a lot so that the BBC couldn't use footage of them crying, and that kind of like made it just a lot less stressful to watch. And yeah, I liked it better before. It's not a brand new fresh take or anything, but that is how I feel about it.
Hi John, I was curious what your overall opinions on Red Dead Redemption 2 are. Oh blimey, that's a hell of a question. It is a big, beautiful, deep, interesting game. However, the problem I've got with it is I don't know if I'm having fun when I play it. It's interesting and it's compelling and I enjoy exploring it, but I don't know if it's actually fun. Is it fun? Am I having fun? Like, Fallout 76 is buggy and broken and silly and sometimes makes no sense, but I am having fun playing it. I sit down with it and I'm having fun. And Hitman 2 is incredibly polished and well put together, very carefully engineered, and I have fun when I'm playing with it. I'm definitely having fun when I'm playing Crusader Kings 2 or Curse of the Vampire Coast, the most recent thing for Total War Warhammer 2, or Stellaris Megacorp. I don't know if I have fun when I'm playing Red Dead Redemption 2, and I also don't know if that matters. Like, a game doesn't have to elicit fun. Horror games aren't fun. Horror games are scary. If Red Dead Redemption elicits a feeling of scale and wonder, is that good enough? Does it need to be? Yeah, I have a slightly conflicted view of Red Dead Redemption 2, which is I think it's a fantastic game, but I'm not quite 100% sure exactly how I enjoy it, if you like. It's a very, very interesting, good game, and it will 100% be in my top 10 of the year. Not going to be my game of the year. Probably that's going to go to Hitman 2, actually. But, yeah, it's an interesting one for me. It's a very interesting one. Did you do anything sporty back in your youth? I actually used to be very good at cross-country. Back when I was at school, I ran for the county, in fact. So, yeah, I was actually not a bad runner back in the day, though it's been a long time since I've really done much in the way of that. Ooh, another Nintendo-related question, specifically bringing up Zelda on this occasion. You know, this is the weird thing. Sorry, I'm going to deliberately say something needlessly controversial at this point. Various people have brought up, John, why don't you play Breath of the Wild? To which my incredibly controversial, deliberately controversial response is, why would I play Breath of the Wild when I could play the best Zelda game instead? Oh, now he's done it. Yeah, okay. I'm not going to tell you which my favourite Zelda games are. I'm going to tell you, I do have a couple in mind I would like to feature on the channel. Breath of the Wild isn't one I want to rush to. There are other older Zelda games that I consider to be the absolute classics, the creme de la creme, that I would like to feature first. Watch this space, you won't have to wait too long for Zelda, I don't think. I won't be able to resist. If you weren't doing YouTube, what do you think you'd be doing instead? Well, I'd probably still be doing the old day job, which was marketing. Though, having done YouTube, if YouTube ever totally collapses for whatever reason, probably I'll end up back in marketing. Except these days, having worked in gaming all this time, I'll probably work on the marketing side with one of the gaming publishers or something. So yeah, I might well at some point, when YouTube just stops working, explodes, Article 13, who knows? Yeah, at some point I'll probably end up doing marketing for some form of video game publisher, who knows? Do you have any particular views on the specific series you're doing with Dan for Fallout 76? I think it's a nice breath of fresh air. It's very different to the other one, which is something I was very keen on. It's something very silly and very fluffy. It's a bit more meta. We can talk about the game and the state of the game more openly because we're not focusing on, like, you know, the actual kind of the plot and investigating the world because it's areas I've been to before and stuff like that. I like the fact that we can build stuff together. I like the fact there's a bit more of an objective going on because we're actually trying to build something. I like the fact it's, very light-hearted and based around comedy. People seem to like it. I mean, some people are not desperately keen on Dan in our community, and, you know, some people in Dan's community are probably not desperately keen on me either. Not everyone's going to like everyone else. Just because we're friends, and I think we both actually like working with each other, and we both think we can actually add something to each other's videos, that doesn't mean everyone's going to be keen on it. I think it is a fun little fluffy series. It's not going to be a long series. Honestly, if it makes it to part 10, I'd be surprised, because The Crew 2 went up to, what was that? Was that 8? Maybe it went slightly longer than that, I can't remember. But The Crew 2 was not long. This will not be a long series. I think it is a fun, fluffy series that's working quite well for both of us. How do you rate Knights of the Old Republic and its sequel, The Sith Lords? Well, I can't really rate them, because while I played them a tiny bit many years ago, never actually went all the way through them. But if you were to watch this space, I wouldn't bet against it. Alright? Like, there are many series I have planned, but that one is towards the top of the list. Alright? Watch this space, especially when things quieten down in the new year. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Hey John, how do you feel about the LGBT community? I've heard you say good things about us before. I was wondering if you're supportive. Well, I hope I am. Because, when I was back at university, and this was years and years ago, of course, there was a very prominent and very visible LGBT community. I mean, I'm just part of the generation, I think, where it was never a big deal to me. It was never a big deal to me at all. Like, I'm straight, but I don't see how it really affects me whatsoever if someone else isn't. So I've just always been purely, like, live and let live. Like, I hope I've been a decent ally. Like, I'm not really sure what the criteria would be when you're saying, I'm wondering if you're supportive. Like, I hope I am. Insofar as, I hope I've never been a dick to anybody for that reason, and I'd never treat anyone differently for that sort of reason. So hopefully yes, but I'm not 100% sure kind of what you mean by the question. So hopefully yes anyway. Are you ever going to do a story playthrough of Assassin's Creed 2? Oh, you're right, I mentioned that a long time ago. Honestly, probably not. Alright, it was a vaguely nice idea once upon a time, but I haven't thought about that for a very long time, so honestly probably not. I think I mentioned that in the context of if I was going to do, like, an Assassin's Creed playthrough, it would be either 2 or Black Flag. So, yeah, I mean, if I ever do an Assassin's Creed playthrough, it probably will be either 2 or Black Flag. I just don't know when or if that's going to happen. It's a long way off if it will. What are some of your favourite heartwarming game moments where the game writers got your heartstrings tugged? Ooh, interesting. It's completely not the question you've just asked, but probably like the most effective franchise at tugging at my heartstrings is actually Life is Strange. I actually think for the most part, even though some of it is slightly overwritten and sometimes in particular Chloe's dialogue can be a little bit awkward and stilted, as a franchise, it is very, very good when it gets all its ducks in a row at tugging on the old heartstrings. But normally in the sense of tragedy and sadness, like the very end of episode 2, the first season's episode 2, like the suicide. There was heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. And then Chloe in the alternate universe where you've got to make the decision about euthanasia. That was very upsetting and very sad, but very well done. I can't think of a comparable example on the happy side, but I will say, yeah, I'll kind of tangentially answer by saying a game that tugs on my heartstrings very effectively is the Life is Strange franchise, even if not quite in the way you suggested. What size monitor do you work on while gaming? Basically, I've got a big desk, and I've got 2 monitors in front of me. One is a native 1080p monitor, and one is a native 1440. For the most part, I actually record on the 1080, so I can record native 1080p, because that's a lot easier to work with. When I'm actually editing complex stuff in particular, I'll go over to the 1440 screen, so I've got more space to have my preview window and still have all my tracks available. In particular, when I'm doing multi-POV stuff, like the cat stuff I'm doing with Dan, that's very, very important indeed. So, yeah, for the most part, however, I'd say the vast majority of my time, I am just using a fairly basic 1080p native monitor that does actually have, yeah, a bright dead pixel down in the bottom left that I've just sort of trained myself to not see. What's the most controversial non-gaming opinion you're willing to share with us? Pluto is a planet, alright? Because it orbits the sun, and when I was a kid, I had a poster on my wall that came out of the Ricicle cereal box, which had 9 planets on it, and Pluto was one of them. And for that reason alone, the Ricicle wall chant, Pluto is still a planet, and nothing will ever convince me otherwise. If Pluto being a planet means we have to add more planets in, because that would only be fair, that's cool. More the merrier. Let's have bloody 13 planets in our solar system for all I care. Whatever it takes to bring Pluto back. What's your favourite ancient Greek city-state and why? You know, I've always had a fondness for Megara. Now, we don't know a huge amount about Megara. It's just kind of floating around not too far from Attica, which is the area that Athens is. It's just around the corner from those guys. We don't know much about it, except for just a couple of, like, indirect bits of, like, mythology and comedy and stuff. And I quite like the mystery of one of Athens' closest neighbours being somewhere we don't really know much about. This was a small city-state, not particularly important, that they did sort of accidentally begin one of the Peloponnesian Wars. But yes, unimportant until they accidentally became important. But yeah, there's like a bunch of myths about them, like Byzas, for whom Byzantium was supposedly named, was actually from Megara, which is very cool. That's probably pseudo-history, that's probably not true. But no one really is quite 100% sure where the name Byzantium comes from. So it could be from some bloke called Byzas, who just basically went and set up a city there. Obviously, that's not the same city as would become Constantinople and Istanbul. Instead, Constantinople was kind of built on its like ruins and foundations and whatever. Completely different cities, just built on the same site. And also, it shows up in Aristophanes' comedies. Like, a Megaran trader shows up to Dicaeopolis' market in the Acharnians when he sets up his own independent nation within Athens. And there's all these jokes that we're not 100% sure we get, because we assume that what we're seeing there when the Megaran comes on stage is like a parody of a Megaran that kind of feeds into all these regional stereotypes. But we don't really know, because we don't know what the jokes about Megarons that Athenians actually appreciated were. So we've got this character who comes on and like he's selling his daughters, and they're like disguised as piglets and something, and we're not 100% sure why Aristophanes has arranged the scene in this way. Like, was this some sort of joke about Megara, or was it as simple as the fact that Megara wasn't doing very well, so the idea was the guy was selling his daughters disguised as pigs, so at least in Athens as pigs they might have something to eat, and thus he was doing them a favour? Or was this some deeper joke about Megarons that we just don't understand? And I like those little glimpses of this city-state that we actually know relatively little about. And I just like the fact that, yeah, possibly, maybe, who knows, maybe it's real history, some bloke from there might have actually set up the first city on the site that would go on to become Constantinople. Have you owned a cat or any other pets before Tabby? Not myself, no. Back when I lived at home, I had dogs when I was a kid growing up. We always had dogs in my house. Tabby is my first cat who's actually mine, though I've lived in shared houses where there are cats before, but I've always been more of a dog person. And as a follow-up question, would you consider getting another cat or another pet in the future as a companion for her? I think Tabby is a solo cat. Tabby is very skittish, she's slow to trust, she doesn't like things changing. I think Tabby will be on her own. Alright, we will have Tabby for as long as Tabby is with us. Tabby will be on her own, because I think she's a lot happier on her own. Like, in future, I think, you know, when Tabby is no longer with us, I think Claire and I have said, we'll probably get a kitten and a puppy at the same time, so they grow up with each other and they're cool with each other. But Tabby, I think, is going to be a cat who just sits on her own, I imagine. She's much happier that way. A question for John and Claire. Who's the better Pokemon, Eevee or Pikachu? Obviously Eevee, because, like, Pikachu can evolve into Raichu, but Eevee can evolve into Jolteon, and Jolteon's better than Raichu. And also Eevee can become, like, 10 million other things. Like, I was about to say Eevee can become 4 other things. Then I remembered, no, wait, there's a bunch of other ones. There was, like, Leafeon and Glaceon, and why the hell was it called? Leafeon was such a bad name. And then there's, like, Sylveon. I'm not sure why Sylveon's called Sylveon, but that's, like, a type of Pokemon that I'm not even sure should exist, to be perfectly honest. And by now there's probably 17 other things that Eevee can evolve into. I don't bloody know. So yes, Eevee. Obviously Eevee's the best. Claire, to you!
Ooh, definitely Eevee. Eevee is a lot cuter, and I kind of came to Pokemon a little bit late. I didn't watch the show when it was on TV. Like, I saw bits and bobs of it, but I didn't, like, follow it at the time when I was a kid. So I don't have, I think, as much of an attachment to Pikachu from that. And of course, like John said, Eevees can evolve into a lot of different things, and I think that makes them a lot more fun to collect in the game.
Interesting question that picks up on something I said earlier. Are you enjoying Fallout 76 more than Red Dead Redemption 2? Yes, I am. And that's partly because I just really like the gameplay loop that existed in Fallout 4 and is also the core of Fallout 76. That does not mean I necessarily think Red Dead Redemption is a worse game. I think Red Dead Redemption 2 is probably the better game than Fallout 76, but I personally enjoy Fallout 76 more. The question of Fallout 76 versus Red Dead Online, that's a bit more of a difficult question as well, because everything I'm hearing about Red Dead Online says it's very grindy, it's maybe not pay to win, but it's pay to alleviate grind. And Fallout 76 may be buggy and broken and all sorts of things need fixing, but there's no aspect whatsoever that you feel like the game is trying to increase grind in order to incentivize you paying to alleviate grind, which Red Dead Online, I've heard many accounts saying that's very much the case, just like it was in GTA Online, and how much money everything costs versus how much money you are able to actually earn through any method other than microtransactions. So I'll have a little look at Red Dead Online myself, put my thoughts together for a video that's probably a week or two out. Also, excellent reminder, Claire, roll the Tabby pictures, please. Oh, she's such a good cat. What is your favourite shotgun out of all the shotguns you've ever used in video games? I'm not sure if it's my favourite, but I always have a special fondness for the shotgun back in 13. That cel-shaded shooter from the GameCube generation. If only because when you shot someone with it, while they were flung back, little comic book panels actually opened up, you know, just showing blood going everywhere and their head snapping back and their body being flung across the room. It just generally felt powerful. Even if it wasn't much more powerful than any other shotgun, it felt more powerful because of that aesthetic, which worked very nicely. So I notice when you don't really hear something that someone says, you go, uh-huh, and it makes me flipping laugh. One of the reasons I love you on your channel, is there a reason or is it just a natural thing for you? I'd never really thought about it, so I'm going to assume it's a natural thing for me, because I've not really thought about it. But Claire's probably sitting in the other room right now thinking, so that's what's happening when he says, when I'm talking to him. I'm probably in trouble now.
Oh, honey, you think I didn't already know that?
Do you ever get any form of repetitive motion injury? No, I take care of myself pretty well. I did once upon a time. The only time it got bad was when I was doing my very original Mass Effect No Gun series. The thing is, that required a huge amount of very careful, intricate editing, because I was actually removing, in a frame-perfect transition, the actual wheel where you are actually selecting powers to make the battles flow a lot more quickly. But that needed to be so perfect, the editing took bloody ages, and it did start to bother my wrist. So I was wearing a wrist strap for a while just to keep things nice and straight, but these days I take better care of myself, so that hasn't happened for years, fortunately. And finally, the most important question of all, John, if Claire baked you a tabby-sized cake, but then Tabby ate it, is Tabby a kitty cake? I'm going to say yes. Ooh, and one final last-minute addition to the Patroncast, because I'm so sorry, this question kind of dropped onto the original version of the Patroncast, but then I remembered it existed, because I remembered seeing it, because I kind of thought up an answer, but then, I somehow skipped over it when I went back to it. So the question is, what is my favourite of Claire's qualities, and what is Claire's favourite quality in me? And I'm going to say, Claire is kind. Claire is very, very kind and caring. And that is my favourite quality of Claire. It's very, very lovely.
I just want you to know that John and I have been teasing each other about this question for the last couple days, between him recording the Patroncast and me editing it and recording my bits for it. He's asked me what I was going to say, and he's been quite smug about my answer. But, I do have to say John's has many very good qualities, but I think the best thing about him is that he is very simply quite brilliant. I think you all know this from watching the videos. He's just very smart and very funny, and there's never really a dull moment. I mean, he's just makes everything really interesting and fun, and he's brilliant, and he's being a smug ass about it.
And on that, ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of the November 2018 Patroncast. Thank you all so very, very much for submitting your questions. Thank you all so very much for those of you who have decided to listen through this whole thing. And thank you all of you very, very much for just being here in general, because, especially as we approach December, then January and February, when ad revenue just falls off a cliff, Patreon is more important right now than it is at any other point in the year, because if it weren't for this, the bottom would just fall out of everything. So, thank you all so very, very much for being here today. Hopefully, by the end of December, things will have quietened down at least a little bit, so I can get my sleep schedule back to where it should be. That would just be absolutely marvellous. But in the meantime, I've been John. This has been many a true nerd, and this has been the November 2018 Patroncast. Thank you very much, and goodbye.